republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. We have a number of guests joining us telephonically and one commissioner, Commissioner Mark Kraft, is joining us by Zoom today, as a number of other people are as well. With that, Mr. Esch, would you please call the roll for the Board of Equalization first?
Yes. I do have a copy of the Open Meetings Act.
Oh, yeah. Good.
Okay, Commissioner Borgeson. Here. Commissioner Boyle. Here. Commissioner Kavanaugh is absent. Commissioner Kraft.
Here.
Commissioner Morgan.
Here.
Commissioner Rogers. Here. Mr. Chair.
Present, thank you. Item A is approval of the minutes from last week's meeting. Item B is to call for a meeting next week for a date on hearing on certified assessment corrections. We have a motion to approve items A and B and a second. Questions or comments? Then could we please vote?
I vote yes.
Motion passes. 5 commissioners voting yes in person, 1 voting yes virtually.
Thank you. Citizen comments. Would anybody like to address the Board of Equalization on anything not on the agenda? Seeing none. Oh, excuse me. Excuse me. I didn't mean to rush.
That's okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. Paul Bellinger, 10215 West Center Road. I'm here to for a formal request for CARES Act funding for parcel number 071327000057. For all others that are assessed in Douglas County, those provided by the Douglas County Board, any taxation or assessment, you know, we're the people that pay the taxes here. We're the people that should get some of that CARES money back. Our 501c3s that don't get any, they don't pay any taxes, and they're the first people lining up here to get that money. It's the taxpayers. It's all about the taxpayers. If I pay the taxes going in and I don't get anything, and my city comes here and says, gosh, I need to be reimbursed for all those edicts that I placed on the people don't have any money to pay your salary. Every single one of those items in the CARES Act, we as taxpayers take care of. Not the 501c3, not the city of Omaha, none of those people. Those people use our money to fund those programs. If they don't pay the taxes, if the first thing that charity that is a 501c3 does is offset their taxes to the taxable mass out there, those are the people. So I'm here asking you, Mr. President, I'm asking the county executives, I'm asking the officials, I'm asking the officers, when people come here and they ask for CARES Act funding, just equal my voice to theirs. As the Board of Equalization, that's your job, is to make my voice equal to the mayor's or to an attorney's or to a 501c3. If they're demanding something, equal my voice to them as a taxpayer, number one. And then I just have a question for Mr. Esch. Mr. Esch, as county clerk, are the calls and or demands for a jury, are those being met yet? My calls, or for Justin Wayne's calls for a jury, are those being met yet?
Paul, please understand, this is Board of Equalization.
Correct, I understand that, but I also have a petition. I also have a petition before this board that requests a demand for a jury. I was here long before Justin Wayne got on TV asking for a jury. I just wonder, Dan Esch, before this Board of Substance, are you going to hear my demand for the jury prior to Justin Wayne's?
Dan Esch, County Clerk. Well, you know, I'm not the clerk of the court.
Correct.
So, but, you know, as an elected official, I'll advocate for my constituents, so I'll certainly pass along your message, but just know I can't really do anything before you on this matter, other than, I mean, there was an article in the World Herald yesterday that they appointed a special prosecutor, and
Yeah.
so, but honestly, I'm not terribly knowledgeable on what's all going on with that right now.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much, Mr. President, officers.
Would anybody else like to address the Board of Equalization? If not, we will move on. We have resolutions D and E. I am not aware of any need for executive session for the Board of Equalization. And adjourn? Yes. And adjourn? Yes. Okay. All right. Questions or comments? Then could we please vote?
I vote yes.
Motion passes. 5 commissioners in person voting yes, 1 voting yes virtually.
Thank you. We will now open the Board of Corrections meeting. Didn't I see Mike? Okay, good. Hard telling hiding behind the mask. Can we please have roll call for Board of Corrections?
Commissioner Borgeson? Here. Commissioner Boyle? Here. Commissioner Kavanaugh is absent. Commissioner Kraft?
I'm here.
Commissioner Morgan? Here. Commissioner Rogers? Here. Mr. Chair.
Present. Thank you. Citizen comments. Would anybody like to address the Board of Corrections on anything not on the agenda? If not, we will move along to the report from the Director of Corrections. I'm sorry. Okay, excuse me. First, approval of the minutes from May 19th meeting. Okay, questions or comments? Could we please vote on that?
I vote yes.
Takes somebody paying attention.
Motion passes. 5 commissioners voting yes in person, 1 virtually.
Thank you. Good morning, Mike. Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mike Myers, Director of Corrections for Douglas County. It's good to be back in front of you again after a couple of months of not.
Indeed. Nice to have you back.
All right, I'll jump right in. Following the 11th month of our fiscal year, we are under budget by $1,360,249. We have delayed some necessary expenses as we have monitored our budget throughout the fiscal year. And we do have some significant purchases to make prior to the conclusion of the fiscal year. So while we do feel very good about the fact that we will come in under budget, I don't think it'll be a number that large at the conclusion of our end of year spending. In May, $262,527 were spent on overtime. This is nearly identical to the previous month, despite the fact that we have incurred additional COVID-19 related overtime costs because we opened our quarantine unit in the jail for the first time. We have made, to put this into some perspective, we were spending nearly $500,000 on overtime per month last fall. So we've made tremendous strides in our staffing. A lot of people deserve credit for that. And we hope to be able to even improve on these numbers as we move forward. Enclosure number 2, community corrections and in-house programs. Due to the drastic impact of COVID-19 on community corrections activities, our data is significantly different than the norm. We have repurposed several staff to allow essential functions to continue. And to that end, I have some data that I didn't have available to me at the time of preparing this report. Our reentry services team and our case management team and community corrections are spending at least portions of every day facilitating virtual court hearings. We can facilitate up to 8 virtual courtrooms at a time. And that does not include courtroom 50 at the jail, which is virtual all the time at this point, and will remain virtual till mid-August, and will be reassessed at that point. We facilitated 301 district court hearings, 48 federal court hearings, 26 immigration hearings, 10 juvenile court hearings. We helped the defense attorneys with viewing virtually with their clients for 40 hours of discovery materials. We also had held hearings for people who have charges in Douglas County who are currently being held in other places virtually. That eliminated the needs for the sheriff to go get them and bring them from other counties. We did 13 hearings for individuals who were housed in other facilities across the state. On May 31st, the Criminal Justice Center, which houses community corrections, was closed in response due to the ongoing civil unrest in the area. This was done for the safety of our staff and clients who reside in that area. That facility is a little more vulnerable than the jail itself, and we did have some rumors that the jail at one point was going to be a target of protests. For the most part, we were not. We did have some graffiti painted on the jail and some traffic across our property, but it was by and large handled by the protesters, handled very well as far as the jail, their interaction with the jail goes. We're actually reopening that today. One individual served 5 days in the Sanction Center. 4 individuals served a combined total of 24 days in the Transitional Discharge Center. And as I mentioned previously, our reentry services staff have basically been repurposed to be courtroom facilitators. The 24/7 sobriety operations have changed dramatically during the pandemic in order to become largely a remote-based program to minimize face-to-face interactions. We have seen an increase in drug test violations with changes to the program because the immediacy of our testing, the immediacy of the consequences and results is not as strong as it was prior to the pandemic. So it's not unexpected that we would see some consequences for those choices that were made out of the concern for safety of everyone involved. There were 1,755 breath tests that were completed using remote technology. 12 were positive for alcohol use. There were 2 no-shows for alcohol breath testing. And basically what we've replaced the in-person people coming down and doing a breath test face-to-face is they have devices that they carry with them that are basically a combination of a breathalyzer, a camera, which uses facial recognition software to verify that it's that person who's actually giving the breath test, and it takes a GPS point. They carry that device with them at all times, and we set it to go off or request a test on the schedule that they would have had when they were testing in person. So a no-show means that they ignored the request for a test. The overall compliance rate for breath testing was 99.3%. 42 individuals were monitored for 1,145 days of SCRAM monitoring. There were 0 no-shows, 1 tampering violation, and 1 alcohol violation. The overall SCRAM compliance rate was 99.9%. There were 55 saliva drug tests administered with 2 positive tests and 1 no-show. This is an area, the drug testing we used to, prior to the pandemic, we were doing hundreds of in-person saliva tests, maybe up to 700 a month. We've replaced them with the drug testing patches, which we used to do 10 or 12 a month. And you can see my next line is we did 155 drug testing patches for testing that were submitted for testing, and there were 23 violations. Work release admitted 6 individuals. House arrest admitted 81 individuals. The reentry assistance program admitted 14 individuals, and we utilized electronic monitoring for 6 individuals on the RAP program. Corrections programs admitted 47 individuals. Pretrial services continues to provide daily information to the courts regarding candidates for bond reduction and early pleas in response to the pandemic. 18 individuals were referred for priority prosecution and 301 bed days were saved. 396 individuals were placed on pretrial release. 1,411 individuals were monitored on pretrial release with an 84% compliance rate over the course of the month. And 159 individuals visited the law library in May. Enclosure number 3, compliance. Our third-year documentation for our ACA accreditation is currently being gathered. We anticipate scheduling our accreditation audits for October or November of this year. That could be a little bit up in the air depending on how the pandemic is ongoing at that time. It is possible that they could waive it and push it back till early next year. Enclosure number 4, personnel. 14 new officers completed field training on May 8th. 17 officers began academy training on May 26th. We are already building another class, which will begin in mid-July, and we plan on settling into quarterly academies for the third and fourth quarter of 2020. This will allow for some of our e-learning training to be replaced with higher value in-class training, and we will be able to, and we'll have more time in between academy to conduct in-service training. This has been a goal of ours for some time, to get to the point in our staffing where we could actually take small breaks in between hiring so that our training staff can actually train the staff who are already present and continue to build their skills rather than just constantly doing new hire classes. And I'm thankful that we're nearing that point. 2 officers, both below the rank of sergeant, left employment in May. We concluded the month having 385 of our authorized 396 uniformed staff. This is an all-time high of the number of uniformed staff employed at the Douglas County Department of Corrections.
We kind of decided as a committee we were going to listen and not enter into exchanges.
Okay.
I'll see if anybody's
They certainly are, and I think
just so the folks who are participating via Zoom, this is Clerk Esch. Some of you were unable to mute on our own, so please just make sure you're muted, please. Thank you.
Moving on to enclosure number 5, our population. Our admissions for the month of May were 1,487. That is a significant increase. To keep that in perspective, though, that's actually less than normal for this time of year, or for any time of year for that matter. But it is, since the onset of that pandemic, it is a couple of hundred more people than we had in the previous couple of months. We had 1,336 releases. Our high count was 1,227. Our low count was 1,080. Our average daily population was 1,136. I do want to give some kudos to probation for being very judicious during this time with their use of sanctions that involve incarceration. Our custodial bed sanction day, or custodial sanctioned bed days are very low, 76. Pre-pandemic, that was 400 or 500. So they've done a great job of finding other ways to hold people accountable that don't include incarceration. The U.S. Marshal population decreased. The ICE population increased. The felony pretrial population increased. The misdemeanor pretrial population decreased. Probation violations remain stable. Again, stable is much lower than historical. The female population increased. We did continue to only have 3 of the 4 housing units that are typically dedicated towards females open, however, and one of those has been dedicated as our quarantine unit. Enclosure number 6, medical. We had 989 intake screenings. There were 389 health and physical assessments. Inmates were sent out 17 times for emergent medical care. 3 of those were by 911. There were 3 hospital admissions, which resulted in a combined total of 8 days of hospitalization. That is actually a significant decrease over what we've been seeing in terms of hospital days as well. Enclosure number 7, mental health. There were 128 initial psychiatric assessments, 98 initial mental health assessments. There were 57 mental health infirmary placements. We referred 4 individuals to the Board of Mental Health, and 5 individuals were referred to a long-term psychiatric facility. In almost all of those cases, that's the Lincoln Regional Center. I do want to let everyone know that the Lincoln Regional Center is dealing with an outbreak of COVID in their facility, so placements to there are currently on hold. Other noteworthy items. We do continue to respond and evolve in our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. In May, cloth masks were implemented for all inmates when we received a shipment of 3,000 of them. We are also, as of this week, expanding our testing for the inmate population. Anyone who remains in custody for 10 days will be tested on day 10. We estimate that we'll be conducting, I think I'm a little high on this estimate that I gave you, it's probably going to be closer more to 100 tests per week. This replaces our current inmate testing plan, which is based upon symptoms or known exposures. To date, approximately 20 inmates have been tested, with no cases originating from the jail. We are implementing this change in order to move inmates out of our 14-day observation period a couple of days sooner. As the population has increased, separating people in celled housing units according to their cohort group has become more and more challenging to find adequate space. We do anticipate the population typically in the summer is going to be a little higher even during a pandemic. This will allow us to move individuals out of that lockdown period that we have them in a couple of days sooner, and should give us a little more breathing room to continue to isolate new inmates who are coming in with their cohorts who came in on the same day that they did. We've had 134 staff members tested since the onset of the pandemic. 3 have tested positive during the month of May. 2 are fully recovered and have returned to work. Each of these 3 staff did not have exposures to each other. This indicates that the protective measures we have in place appear to have been effective in preventing the spread among ourselves. We opened our quarantine unit for the first time in May. This was done out of an abundance of caution, as 2 individuals who were booked into the jail had confirmed positive tests prior to being arrested. Both individuals were well past the 14-day quarantine period, so opening the quarantine unit may not have been required. I feel that we've been successful in combating this pandemic at the jail because we've taken the approach that if you can do A, B, and C and probably be okay, the risks are high enough at the jail that we're going to do D, E, F, and G to go above and beyond to make sure that we're protecting the individuals who are in our custody as well as our staff. And we did have a 3rd individual who had tested positive prior to coming into the jail. That's actually will be included in my June report, but just to give you the most up-to-date information, we did have our 3rd individual who had tested positive in the community and then subsequently got arrested, and that person is also in our quarantine unit as well. I am concerned that due to the high number of arrests as a result of the recent protests that, we may have increased our risk to COVID exposure. That is not a position statement on the protests themselves. I actually am very supportive of the messages that 99% of the people were attempting to convey with those protests. As a consequence of the protests, however, we did have a great deal of people coming into the jail who had been in very close proximity to each other. And I would also like to continue to express our thanks to the Douglas County Health Department. We lean on them regularly for guidance and resources throughout this process. Our new security contractor took over operations for our existing security system this month. Preparations are underway for the installation of the new security system. The conversion to the new system will take place over the course of approximately the next 18 months. And finally, I wanted to point out that the women and men of the Douglas County Department of Corrections have continued to perform in an exemplary manner despite the numerous challenges they've faced recently. From continuing to have a COVID-19 rate that is less than the community at large, to overcoming high-stress situations, including the unprecedented influx of bookings associated with recent civil unrest, they have handled it all. Much of the feedback I receive indicates that our staff have come together and that morale is improved significantly. It is also uplifting that our staff have been receiving well-deserved support and recognition from the community that sometimes has lacked in the past. We have tended to be a little overlooked in the grand scheme of first responders and public safety officials at corrections. We've received numerous donations of meals, snacks, drinks. Banners have been hung from people who've made them in the community, and greeting cards have been sent expressing appreciation for how we've handled the challenges we've faced recently. I'm very appreciative of that, and it means a lot to our staff as well. So I am grateful also to the individuals and organizations who've been demonstrating that support. I'm ready for your questions.
Thank you, Mike. Good report. Commissioner Boyle.
Thanks, Mike. That was.
I have a question, if I may.
All right, we'll get to you in a minute, Commissioner Kraft.
Okay. Okay, let me be as brief as possible. You mentioned that you're going to have you're not going to be spending everything that was budgeted. Do you think you'll end the year that way?
I believe we will be under budget. It won't be by as large of a
Right.
number that was present in this report.
Okay, what do you think contributed to it? Was it personnel, or usually what it is, overtime, or what do you think?
I know that we've been driving down overtime costs. That has certainly helped. There are some significant expenses that we had delayed purchasing until we were sure how we would be finishing the end of the fiscal year. So that also played a part of it. There's a down payment on our security system that's going to be coming, processed this month. So, the number will not be as large as the number that I reported to you today.
Is the security system the one that you talked about several months ago? Would you just briefly tell the public
Sure.
what that is?
Absolutely.
It's an important system.
Absolutely. Throughout the jail, we have added, over the course of his time, added functionality to our security system that's been associated with construction primarily.
Right.
And as a result, some of those systems are very antiquated, require a lot of maintenance. Sometimes our video is not as clear or as high quality as we would like it to be. So what we've never done before is rebuild the security system from the ground up. Probably with the exception of when probably that's true, because we actually didn't. In 2004, the jail still existed when we did the last edition. So it's never been built to be the same system, have consistent technology throughout the facility. So this will replace cameras. It will add cameras. It will replace a lot of the controls to doors and so forth, intercoms, basically anything that helps our central control area operate the facility will be updated. This will make us more transparent.
Okay.
The public will be able to see when we need, if we have an issue that we're addressing, you know, the public can be assured that we have a clear view, that we have fewer blind spots in the facility that aren't covered by cameras.
Okay.
So it is, it's a necessary expense when we're excited about the capabilities that it'll bring to us when it's completely installed.
You mentioned some kind of a X-ray thing or something that other prisons have that you are going to be adding to, so that
Yes.
it's a contraband. Could you briefly talk about that?
Absolutely, and we should be ready to purchase that now as some grant. We were reallocating some grant funds, and that the pandemic slowed down the approval process for reallocating those funds. These were federal JAG dollars that we were going to use that we had for a different purpose that we thought this was a better purpose. So over the course of the summer, likely, we will have a body scanner. Individuals who are booked into the jail will be scanned. It's a real high-quality image that you can manipulate in a variety of ways for us to be able to detect objects, foreign objects that people have concealed inside themselves when they're being booked into the jail.
Okay.
We have had, you know, both tragic outcomes and near misses because of individuals who have had drugs, you know, in balloons or something that they've swallowed. You know, this will allow us to identify those right away.
Could I ask about ICE? I get a lot of questions about ICE and why do we have ICE in our facility? And if we didn't, what would happen? Where would they be? And how are those inmates treated?
Well, as far as they're treated, they're treated very similarly to any other inmate who's in our custody. They actually have a few more rights as far as it goes with the ICE contract. We have to allow them more law library time than we do for the inmate population as a whole, for example. But by and large, a day in the life of somebody who's detained on an immigration-related issue is very similar to someone who is detained on a criminal matter. I actually met several months ago with, and his name is going to escape me, but he's an attorney who's an advocate for immigrants. And the conversation, like, what if we didn't house individuals here? What would happen? You know, that was actually a topic of that discussion. And his take was, housing a small amount of people like we do is probably actually beneficial for them in terms of their ability to represent these individuals. They would have to travel hours and hours to go to other facilities. If we stopped housing, I would make an assumption that ICE would still detain them somewhere.
Right.
And the ability for them to receive representation would become more challenging because they would be hours away from the Omaha area instead of closer by.
And ICE agents don't come into our facility, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then I wanted to mention that in talking about the face masks that Mr. Myers obtained, I think is a terrific story. Why don't you tell where they're
Sure.
from and how much they cost
Yes.
and what they look like?
Well, they're orange, so they match our typical fashion statement that most of our incarcerated population is making. We actually we received those from the Nebraska Department of Correctional Services. They're Cornhusker State Industries.
So prisoners made them?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And I believe we paid $1.60 per mask.
Okay. Well, I wanted to tell you that I received notice from GQ that you're getting the Fashion Statement Award. Thanks a lot, Mike. You're doing a good job, very good job. Thank you.
Most impressive. Commissioner Kraft.
Yes, Mike, when you were talking, I couldn't tell how long you said the new security system would take to implement.
It will be installed over the course of the next 18 months.
18 months, okay.
And it won't be all turned on and off at the same time. It'll be a housing unit at a time will be converted to the new system. And it'll take about 18 months to get through all of the housing units in all the areas of the jail.
Thank you. And to hear that the moral in the jail is on the increase, having your workers satisfied is tremendous, because that's not happening in most places of incarceration. So thank you for all you're doing.
Indeed.
Also, if we could have the commissioner speak into the mic, because it's not coming through very loud.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, that's
Kraft.
all.
Mike, I had one quick question, and I mean, this is almost fun, well, not fun, there's nothing fun about a jail, but the fact that we're up to 385 staff. I mean, we're getting away from, this overtime has been such a scourge for so long, and you're finally getting past it. My question is, how are you handling, I mean, now you're down to just a little bit of overtime relative to lots and lots. Is it all being done voluntarily? Or is there any mandated overtime going on yet?
There is some here and there, and that has to do specific days on specific shifts. You know, shift bidding happens twice a year, and sometimes if you lose people, particularly, you know, we have fewer people that work the overnight shift. So if we lose a few people on the 7 to 3 shift, they have to cover for those empty spots if they haven't been filled by voluntary overtime. So it's oftentimes the people working overnights, because they're a small shift that has to cover an oncoming larger shift's vacancies, because we can't order people from the following shift to come in. We have to order people who are already present in the facility. So it's decreased drastically. We did have some, I'll say in April, ordered overtime was virtually non-existent.
Nice.
In May, we did have a little bit more. We're starting to get into the vacation months, and staff, you know, they also have bid for their vacation months in advance, and so when those times come. And we also, as a result of the 3 staff members who did test positive, we had a lot of people out for a few days here and there for testing and waiting for results. So that also contributed to the need at times to order some staff for overtime. So it is greatly decreased, but we did have a little bit more in May than we did in April.
Thank you. And my only other question for you, I applaud all the testing that you're doing. Are you able to get all the tests you need, all the test kits? Do you have adequate supply?
As of just recently, yes, and thanks to the Douglas County Health Department. We reached out to them last week, and as we were starting to become more and more challenged with finding the adequate space to separate people by their cohort groups, we had a conversation with them on how are we going to manage this going forward if the population continues to increase. And that's where we worked out the plan with them. They brought 200 tests down right away to get us started. Nice. And they said it would be no problem to get the 100 or 125 tests a week on an ongoing basis. Now, I fully expect we may find, you know, you do more testing, you get more results. And there may be some asymptomatic people that, because we kept them quarantined for the first 14 days, and on day 15 they get medically assessed, and if there's no symptoms, they go out into general population. They may have had it and we never knew it. I mean, that's the nature of how this, but that's why you separate people. So now that we're going to be testing in a much larger volume, don't be surprised when I come back and tell you that we have more results, because it won't mean that we're less safe or that something's gone backwards in terms of our practices. It just means that we're more aware of what's going on.
Very good, thank you. Commissioner Borgeson.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say thank you for everything that you have done in terms of your leadership during this. And I want you to tell the staff that we do appreciate all of them. I know they felt a little slighted when everybody was, so much attention was on our long-term care facility. And rightfully so, because they had, many cases of residents and staff. But we certainly do not want them to think that we have forgotten them. They have done, again, a stellar job through all of this, and again, with the protest and the number of arrests that you've had on top of all of it, you guys have done, and gals have done a tremendous job, and I just wanted you to please let them know how much we appreciate them.
I will. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Keep up the good work. And we won't, I'm just going to declare the meeting adjourned. We have a motion there, so we don't actually have to vote on that. So we are adjourned as a Board of Corrections, and will now convene as a Board of Commissioners. Could we please have the roll call for that, Mr. Esch?
Commissioner Borgeson? Here. Commissioner Boyle? Here. Commissioner Kavanaugh is absent. Commissioner Kraft?
I am here.
Commissioner Morgan? Here. Commissioner Rogers? Here. Mr. Chair?
Present. Thank you. Item 1, minutes and claims. Minutes from last week's meeting, claims for payment through today's date.
Motion approved. Second.
Questions or comments?
I'll be abstaining. Checks.
All right, there was a check written to PJ Morgan's company, so he will be abstaining. Could we please vote?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, could you repeat the motion and second for me? Commissioner Rogers, the motion, and second was, Commissioner Boyle was the motion, Commissioner Rogers was the second. Okay, we are ready.
Thank you.
I vote yes.
Motion passes. Commissioner Morgan abstains. 4 commissioners voting yes in person, 1 commissioner voting yes virtually.
Thank you. This brings us to the consent agenda, where we find items A through F.
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Boyle, second by Commissioner Rogers. Questions or comments to anything on the consent agenda? Anything anyone would like pulled? Commissioner Boyle.
Thank you. I'd like to say that I encouraged Commissioner Morgan to serve as a member of the Omaha Douglas Public Building Commission. I've observed him over the years, and whenever we get into any issue of money at all, he is, I can hear his brain turning and doing things, and he comes up with absolutely correct answers. He'll be a terrific addition to the Building Commission, and I must say, too, that I will miss the chair, Claire Duda, from those meetings. It was always fun to spar with him occasionally, even there. So I do want to say that I honor him for leaving the commission. He did a terrific job, and I want to welcome PJ Morgan to the Building Commission. It's a great addition.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'll make
Commissioner Morgan.
Well, Mike, thanks for your kind remarks, and yeah, I appreciate the support of this board and the request for my service on that. I was lucky enough to serve on the first building commission with J.D. Anderson, and have a great respect for the way that board's gone, and Paul has done a superior job of running the building commission. So I thank all of you for your support, and I'll try to do my very best.
We haven't voted yet, but anyway.
That's why I gave you that talk.
Other questions or comments to anything on the consent agenda? If not, could we please vote?
I'm not sure if I should abstain or.
No.
I'll be this one low.
Commissioner Kraft, I didn't catch, did you vote yes?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Motion passes 6-0, 5 voting yes in person, 1 voting virtually.
Thank you, Mr. Esch. Next is under recognition and proclamations. This is a neat one. Douglas County, a few years ago, kind of by default, fell into social detox when Catholic Charities decided to get out of it, and suddenly there was a void, and the county, as the caregiver of last resort, said, if nobody else is doing it, we'd better do it. And I am so impressed with our staff and the job that they have done. They are now being most appropriately recognized for it, and I would like to ask the Chair of the Board of Trustees, Commissioner Ferguson, if she would say a few words at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and this is a great honor to be recognized by our national NACO, and I would ask Sherry Glassnap and Terry Speck to come down because they can talk a little bit more in detail about the program, but the NACO Achievement Awards recognizes counties with innovative programs, and this certainly has turned into being one that we can be proud of. And again, under Terry's leadership, specifically running the program, and Sherry as our director, have done a phenomenal job with a lot of obstacles that have come in our way. And Mr. Chair, you'll love this because it's because of the state that has caused this for us. But through all of this, they have, stayed the course. You guys have done, again, a phenomenal job of being able to work through all of those obstacles and still be recognized as one of the great innovative programs within county government. And so congratulations to that. But I am going to ask you if you can, I don't want to read the resolution just word for word. I want you to explain to us the program and what changes you've made, which I think actually are not just the changes that we had to make, but changes that actually made the program better for the individuals in which we serve. And you all being there, boots on the ground right there, are able to, again, alter that program to actually be a better program. And so if you could just talk about that a little bit, appreciate it. Again, congratulations to you, your staff, everybody involved in making this happen.
Great, thank you. Well, as you guys are aware, we have two separate programs within the Douglas County Detox. We have the
Mask off and speak in the microphone. There you go.
Thank you. As you're aware, we have two separate programs in detox. We have the voluntary program and the civil protective custody program. In the late 70s, the state of Nebraska decriminalized public intoxication, and with that, there eventually was a statute passed in the legislature in order to provide civil protective custody for individuals who are found in a public or quasi-public place, and they have no other safe place that they can go to. Police officers with the ability to write a traffic ticket or make an arrest can bring them to our program, the Civil Protective Custody Program. It is a medically monitored withdrawal program. Clients are intoxicated up to a 0.4 when they are admitted, and we have nursing on staff 24/7 to manage that safe withdrawal. Typically, when they are admitted, the doors are locked at admission and they remained locked throughout the stay. Generally, we can keep them up to 24 hours, but the average length of stay is about 13 hours. It is not an arrest, and there is no record of the clients being in our program other than our medical records. Douglas County took the program over in February of 2017, and we really had a strong desire to make the program better and more treatment focused. At the time, we focused definitely on health hygiene, withdrawal management, and trying to connect them to a program once they're discharged, but we didn't have everything in place really to do what we needed to do. Obviously, 13 hours isn't a lot of time, especially when they're very intoxicated when they come in. The other issue is if someone has aggression issues when they're sober, those are definitely going to be more severe when they are intoxicated. And we are a small program, kind of out on our own, and the thought of unlocking doors was pretty concerning because you can't determine how somebody's going to act when they come in. So with that in mind, and really wanting to improve the overall program, we developed what we call a zone program. It consists of 3 zones, a red zone, a yellow zone, and a green zone. Everyone who comes in to the program is initially admitted into the red zone, which means the doors are locked. And through an ongoing assessment, we look at their intoxication level, their ability to follow directions, what medical oversight they need at that point in time based on their intoxication, if we're seeing any signs of aggression, that sort of thing. And as long as that continues, they do remain in a locked door. As things start to progress, they move to a yellow zone where we're starting to see them, the clients follow through with expectations or requests. Their medical state is getting to be a little bit more stable. Their withdrawal process is going okay. And once they meet the needs in that level, they go to the green zone where we unlock the door. And that is the real fascinating thing with this program and what is really new in that program. Our goal is to continue to work on the green zone where eventually we would like to have an average of by hour 4, they're unlocked. But with that program, we encourage them to come out of their rooms if they're able, interact with staff on getting services in place. We welcome them to go over to our voluntary detox program where they're able to participate in AA meetings, group, individuals, and really, again, work with staff on discharge planning. So what we're seeing, obviously, is more connection to community when those clients leave. We've seen clients leave with AA sponsors, which had not historically happened, with a goal in mind of what outpatient services they want, and we've helped them make that connection. And we have seen more clients transition for admission from the civil protective custody program to our voluntary program. So that's been a real positive. As we're going into the next fiscal year and we're looking at new data to track, because this program wasn't around a year ago yet, we'll really be looking at that time from admission to unlock doors, tracking how many come over to the voluntary program, how many who choose not to still come out and participate, and the number of clients that are connected with a resource once they leave. So in a nutshell, that's the program.
One other thing about this is the program, you all were going to be able to attend our annual NACO conference and be recognized at our Achievement Awards luncheon, but since the conference has been canceled, canceled physically, we're going to do a virtual one where you will still be recognized within the county, NACO County news publications and stuff, but we're trying to think of ways, innovative ways to be able to do that recognition even virtually. So again, just know that this is a big deal, being recognized and the work that you've done with this program. Just the results that you've stated thus far, us being able to move those individuals closer to being able to achieve some connection within the community to help them with their addiction is absolutely amazing and totally worthwhile. So thank you again for all that.
Thank you. This is a great recognition. Douglas County has a lot of very good things going on, but so many of them are just quiet, out of sight, out of mind. The world doesn't realize what a great job you guys are doing down there. And so how proud I am that you're being recognized by others for what we already knew. Commissioner Boyle.
Thank you.
Well, I want to add my 2 cents to what Commissioner Borgeson and Commissioner Duda said. I think it's really a spectacular operation that you've taken over and baptized it in a very positive way. I want to ask you, do you deal with people who are suffering from mental illness in addition to the intoxication problems? And what do you do about that, if anything?
Mm-hmm. We do have one of the psychiatrists from the Community Mental Health Center on call 24/7.
Okay.
So they go hand in hand,
Right.
mental illness and substance use issues. So yes, we do have individuals with mental health issues come in.
Okay.
Obviously, they have to be withdrawing from something in order to be
Right.
admitted.
That's right. And most of the residents, are they brought in by law enforcement officers? Is that how it usually works?
For the civil protective custody program, yes.
Okay. And the voluntary one, they come in by themselves?
They come in
correct?
on their own,
Okay.
yeah.
I guess what I would say is that, and I was noticing who's running this, and I think my wife would appreciate this because she was a big advocate of women, and I am too. She made me a terrific convert. She taught me a lot of lessons, and one of them is that this is what happens when women run. And it's really, I'm very serious. You pick up the pieces, you think about, it's a caring attitude that women have, and I don't mean that men don't care, but it's just that you have some skills, a skill set that is really valuable. And I think in these sorts of situations, you seriously think about how to make things better, which is, I think, what women do all the time. So I appreciate it, and I'm very pleased at your honor, and I think Mary Ann is probably the catalyst that brought this about, and I appreciate her effort. She's always looking for good things that happen. She's a very positive person. So good luck, and I don't think I've ever been there, but I'll.
You are always welcome.
I'm just kidding. I'll be by to see you. Hey, thanks a lot and congratulations. This is what happens when women get involved. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would say,
Commissioner
and,
Duda, if I could speak.
go ahead, Commissioner Kraft.
Yes, you and I visited there, and it was fantastic. And while we were there, we saw somebody voluntarily come in for the voluntary custody. And to see people do that and want to change their life and realize they have a problem is excellent. We are on the forefront of so many different projects with our jail and our reentry and our mental health processes we're doing. The public needs to know, and we need to create a comprehensive list of all of these things we're doing so we can perhaps publish an op-ed or a brochure on it. So
Very good.
if I could ask Mary Ann or anybody with that would be great.
Thank you, Commissioner Kraft. And yes, it was very interesting to visit. The relationship that we now have being run out of the Community Mental Health Center, to your question, what a logical fit. That it's part of under the umbrella of our Community Mental Health Center organization. So nice to be recognized. Keep up the good work.
Thanks,
you.
Terry.
And someday we'll figure out how you're going to get funded down the road too. We still have that little issue
Yeah.
left ahead of us, but in the
Sounds
meantime, keep
great.
up the good work.
Thanks a
All right,
lot.
thank you.
Oh, I do have an award. Typically, we ask you to come shake hands. These aren't typical times. Can I at least hand you the certificate? Thank you.
Leah will get a picture of you guys. We'll have to do ours at another time. Unless you can, if we can stand, like, still stand apart.
Yeah, we can try to manage it. Stand in front. You guys can just kind of move toward the center, we can try it. Okay, let's try this. Yes, I don't see your smile, Mike. Here we go. Yep.
And make sure that Leah photoshops me in.
One of the revelations, I'm going to pontificate very briefly here. One of the revelations to me in my long duration as a commissioner has been how many county employees, it's not a job, it's a calling. And I first saw this at the health center where I realized this was a personal mission for so many of our employees. It was not about the paycheck, it was about what they were achieving. And boy, if I don't see that here, what great and dedicated employees we have. This is their calling, it's not their job.
I agree, that's what I meant about the human.
You know, Brian, I don't say that as a joke. It's very, very true. There's a sensitivity that is brought to this and problem solving. It's terrific.
Amen to that. Okay, citizen comments. Oh, we got to vote on it. Oh, okay. Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Clerk. We have a motion and a second to vote for the resolution recognizing our social detox program. Could we please vote?
Okay, motion by Borgeson, second by Boyle.
I vote yes.
Motion passes 6-0, 5 voting in person, 1 voting virtually.
Thank you. Citizen comments. Would anybody like to address this board on any items not on the agenda? This is your opportunity. Good morning, Larry.
Good morning. Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, Nebraska, 68132. Thank you. This morning I want to first of all ask that with all this expense that we've gone to, could you turn up the volume or lean into your microphones? I have a hard time hearing you today.
All right.
Sometimes Mike, but I can hear Commissioner Kraft. I couldn't hear most of what that lady had to say until the end. And I really don't care to wear a protective device. So, next, I'm glad to see some improvements in this body. I hope to see some improvements in the other body too. But I see that we do now have the rules for handout revised in January. So there have been some improvements there. However, I think we still need to have it on the agenda so we can clarify some things, such as the differences. What does debate mean? Debate when and where and by who? Proclamations and recognition and proclamations. I don't think we get to debate on those. Maybe you guys do, but we don't. And just a quick passing, words matter. The words for that resolution today, recognition, really do scare the hell out of me. It sounds like something out of 1916, Russia. What does presentations mean? If you read your own rules, number one, presentations on these rules say that's for citizens. But it's listed today under the agenda for somebody else, not the citizens. Under citizens' comment rules, it says the board will not back and forth with us. But then Mike had a little back and forth with this gentleman this morning, and nobody challenges that. It gets by when you don't challenge it. And under the Open Meetings Act, somebody up there is supposed to challenge these things. And yes, you can extend my remarks if you care to. Some of them get extended, some of them don't. But without a vote, that's not according to the rules. Public hearings. The other body is quite clear what is a public hearing. This one is not. Now, rules of conduct. The other improvement is, at least the sheriff's deputy is farther over there. He's not quite so close to me and not quite as unsettling. But in today's news, in today's environment, should we be using a sheriff's deputy now as a sergeant at arms? It doesn't seem like we ought to, according to some people around here. So maybe we don't want to put him in jeopardy. Some people get cut off at the microphone for a lot less than others do. And did we elect all of you and give you immunity for anything and everything that is said or done when the microphones are on? I really don't think that was the intent of state or city federal ordinances. And quite often, I have observed some behavior between commissioners back and forth that is really out of control, really out of order, but nobody challenges it. But if the deputies are now charged with maintaining order and decorum, shouldn't they possibly intervene with one of you when you were out of order with comments to another commissioner? Why is he only doing that to me or some other citizen? That's really not fair. and we're all interested in what's fair today. So anyway, the rules maybe need to be changed, such as scratch out presentations, items for the public. Apparently, that's not the case today. Now, during presentations and after presentations, is that when we can have debate back and forth, but not during citizens' comments?
Your 5 minutes are up, Larry.
All right, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to address this group under citizens' comments?
I think Carlson can't be, okay.
Everyone's muted who can't be muted.
I will not be muted. Luis Jimenez, 3306 Birch Street. Good morning. I'd like to relay some comments about injustice that is a priority for people right now in the county. You've all heard the news, you've seen the pictures on social media, you know about the disturbances. And I told people on social media this is a good time, citizens' comment, to talk about that. So I'm gonna try my best. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's protests, demonstrations going on right now, or there was from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. over by Don Klein's residence. People are distraught about his decision. I have not gone out that way out west to demonstrate. I did relay that a special prosecutor or Don Klein removing himself from the grand jury would be appropriate. And that was the case yesterday. James Scurlock's death grand jury has a special prosecutor. The things that are being spoken about is abuse of power and police violence. People have many different stories about what their experiences are. People want to be heard and listen. I think that's what the protesters are pretty much wanting to do. They don't have an outlet. People don't show up in public meetings to express these things. Maybe it's not always the right place to come in, express your grievances. People want to be heard and listened to. The protesters do have encounters, but if you look at how that interaction happens, if people listen to the protesters, that has an impact. In San Jose, I saw some protesters huddling around a vehicle, and the driver stepped out, gave them a thumbs up, went back into his car, and that was the interaction. People want to prevent violence, and not having an outlet to be heard is part of the frustration. I don't have a personal experience that I want to relay about my negative interaction with the police, but you guys, the board talks about some of those things, like disproportionate minority contact with the police. I know that the board can't do anything directly because you're dealing with separate departments, but you guys do talk about it and recognize that there's a problem with the police. It's not just the county sheriff's department, it's also the police department who are bringing in juveniles and other people maybe with mental health issues that we want to lower the numbers. And also talking about mental health and how that impacts all kinds of people can help lower the interactions. And that's what we want to do, I think, is de-escalate. We don't want to have encounters that we can avoid because we're human beings, you know, sometimes we get out of control. This body sees some disorderly conduct, but we all have a responsibility to listen, to see what the problems are, and to see how a policy can change to make our society better. I think the police union contract is something that can have an impact if we change it. It's not state statute, it's not city ordinance, it's an agreement that can be changed. Thank you.
And, well, we shouldn't feedback. We have absolutely nothing to do with the Omaha Police contract, though. I will give that much feedback. Good morning again, Paul.
Paul Bellinger, 10215 West Center Road. I guess my second request here would be to our newest member of the Omaha Douglas Public Building Commission. That would be to dismantle and eliminate purchasing new buildings that we have to defend for the taxpayer using taxpayer money. If we cannot defend the sole proprietor down in the old market, why are we going to put more people in another building? Why are we going to have more buildings that we have to defend at taxpayers' expense? We should be eliminating buildings. The other things, I know that I've been in touch with Commissioner Morgan and Commissioner Boyle related to the bus traffic through our residential neighborhood at 40 miles an hour. Buses that travel 40 miles an hour through a residential neighborhood aren't there to pick up citizens of that community. They're there to transport or to drive by completely empty to the end destination and complicate the issues for the people that reside in the neighborhood. You know, I went over to the Metro Transit Authority over there and dealt with those individuals over there related to the busing issue that we have, related to the mayor's problem of not having any money to fix our street, that 40,000 people drive down pre-COVID every day. The busiest residential area in the state of Nebraska is 102nd and 105th. We can't get the paving fixed, maybe the empty bus that shakes our houses out there now, along with the overfilled trucks, the overweight trucks that are still coming by that shake our facility, our homes. Just like your home, my house shakes when that empty bus comes by at 40 miles an hour. It disturbs our whole neighborhood. You know, the large, big, overfilled trucks now that are heading down to Hy-Vee, they're just destroying roads. Is the CARES Act going to be able to fund all those potholes that are occurring in front of my house? Am I able to come here for some CARES Act funding for the potholes that these issues are causing for me? I asked Matt Mittenberger of the governor's office. He said, no, we can't do anything about that. When we can't change a bus speed through a neighborhood, when we can't change what we buy as a taxpayer and have to defend, there's a problem. There's a problem. You know, when we have people in our communities that are saying to you, Mr. President, I'm gonna burn that son of a bitch down, you know what? You better not build any more buildings. Because at some point in time, you're gonna say something, or you're gonna say something, or the governor's gonna say something, and they're gonna be down there at the new Juvenile Justice Center setting fire to it. We're gonna put another 50, 60 people around that? I mean, come on. Let's, PJ, as the newest member, assure the community for me that that'll occur. Thank you.
Anybody else who would like to address this group during citizen comments? Okay, then we will move next to presentations. am going to take item B first, if I may, so that we have a little more time for A. Commissioner Rogers asked if we couldn't handle B first. So this resolution confirming our committing to dismantle institutional and structural racism. This comes from Commissioners Rogers and Boyle. And I will turn the floor over to one of you.
If I can, can I ask Commissioner Morgan to go first and then I'll follow up? Oh, Commissioner Boyle is.
No, PJ, Mike, he said Commissioner Morgan.
I'm gonna give Commissioner Morgan and I'm gonna come back, hold on.
I thought I'd ask this board, in recognition of George Floyd's funeral taking place right now, not that we take 8 minutes, but even 80 seconds to have that silence here in respect to the deplorable act that occurred, inexcusable. And I'd ask that we have that 80 seconds of silence at this time. Okay, when you think about how long that 80 seconds was and multiply it times 10 plus, you just have the feeling of what took place. And I think for his family, we need to be thinking about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris.
Mr. Chair, what I'd like to do is read it's not quite a resolution, it's a statement, and then I'll give some context and ask for a motion. The statement today reads, in acknowledgement and gratitude of the courageous, heroic, and historic movements of civil rights generations past to end racial discrimination, and notwithstanding more recent efforts to build on their foundational actions to end racial intolerance in our nation and within Douglas County. Recent events have made it abundantly clear that there is still much work that needs to be done to end the structural institutional racism that has plagued the Black community and people of color across this country. Douglas County government provides many vital services that touch all county residents, and this board realizes that it has a fundamental responsibility to ensure that those services are provided in a way that are not only fair, but equitable. Those services include adult and community corrections, juvenile rehabilitation, law enforcement, long-term care, 911 communications, emergency management, public health, general assistance, mental health, and procurement, just to name a few. The members of this board hereby assert our commitment to forthrightly address the faults in a system that had created racial inequity and injustice. And additionally, this board calls on the members of the Nebraska legislature to abolish or amend any current statute that creates or exacerbates racial inequality and structural racism. I want to first thank Commissioner Boyle by kind of giving me some clearance in this, and I want to thank Patrick for putting a draft down to let me think through on this. And then I want to thank Commissioner Borgeson for what she did last week, and she doesn't know it. She kind of gave me a chance to clear my head and take some air out of it, because as Commissioner Morgan said, today is the funeral for George Floyd. And it's a pivot point in regards to where everything's been for the last 3 weeks. And having to walk through this in my head and being at home and seeing my wife cry and having my son ask me, questions like, will he make it to his 20th birthday? I didn't know where I wanted to go with this. But I think the main thing out of this is that the pivot point today, and I want to also thank a lot of people that reached out to me to express their concerns and thoughts. The funeral today is a pivot point because the family lays their family member to rest, but I think it's a pivot point in regards to really an action piece. The council gave room for the community to vent. The legislature gave room for the community to vent yesterday. And when you hear what everybody's saying, you need to give them time to get through the anger, but when you hear through it, they're really asking for structural change. Structural change of years of policy and procedure that, invisibly you don't know institutes a lot of things that we're doing now. And the board has been talking about these things for over the years, but I do think time now is to really double down on that. We've been engulfed in a pandemic, and the pandemic opened up a lot of social fabric and a lot of society things that are unequal. And it reminded me in an article that I read of the time of the Great Depression. And in that period, when the Great Depression hit, the Great Society kind of rebuilt the country back up. But in a book that's named When Affirmative Action Was White, it talked about when the GI Bill was not extended to people of color. It talked about redlining and a lot of these policies that are put in and lived out their days still today. And so as we come to the funeral and people work their way through, I don't want anybody to forget the structural stuff. I added the Nebraska legislature there because so much of what we do is tied to them. But when we talk about structural stuff, we need to understand that 10 years ago, somewhere close to 10 years ago, a gentleman named Ward Connolly came through this state and put an initiative on. He could not get through the legislature. He put it through citizen ballot that banned affirmative action. And if we really are serious about the institutional policy stuff, programs like those that have been bad-mouthed and misinformed about, we need to do our part, and the citizens of Nebraska need to be aware that if you're in this for the long run. And one of the goals we have to do structural-wise is to get that off the book to really institute policy that matters. So I'd like to move for approval of this and ask everybody to stay for this for the long haul and be willing to be uncomfortable with that. Thank you.
Thank you for those eloquent words, Commissioner Rogers. Commissioner Boyle. Commissioner Boyle.
I read a statement by the excuse me, the League of Women Voters that really motivated me to talk to Chris and to Patrick about putting something together for us, because we need to make a statement here on this tragic event that has in so many ways hopefully is going to make life better for people who've been mistreated. And all of us have observed it. I mean, I remember, and I've said it before, but when the pastors used to come up in front of the old city hall and kneel down and pray for open housing, and Reverend McNair was the one who led that group, and I was really taken by that because first of all, I didn't understand it. It just didn't make any sense. I was about 12 years old. I was downtown with my mom and we stopped and watched it, you know. And that had a terrific effect on me. And something else that was really pretty interesting, that when the lynching took place at the courthouse, Mr. Brown was lynched, and Henry Fonda was across the street in the building with his father in the insurance building, and he watched what took place. And it had a lasting effect on him. And Jane was in town and for the on Golden Pond opening, and she told me that that's what influenced her father to be the person that he was, and that influenced the children. And that brings up another point that I feel so strongly about, that this hatred toward people who don't look like others, people of black skin, brown, yellow, whatever, that hate begins at home. So children don't just spring up and hate someone. They hear their parents, they hear their neighbors, they hear people say things that are derogatory, and they pick that up. I have a relative who grew up in a family, an in-law who grew up in a family that, boy, they were just really great, strong Catholics, but boy, were they bigots. And they used all the racial slurs you can imagine, and that young man married into our family. And what a hell of awakening for him. None of that was tolerated. When he would start to tell a joke about a racial group, several people would say, no, we don't want to hear that. We don't want to hear that. Just move, let's do something else. And all those things are the things that happen. And I think I told you before that when Maureen was in St. Joe, Missouri, practicing medicine, the mailman came up to the house and was talking to her cashier when they just moved in, and he dropped the N-word. And she told him to get off the property, to never say that word again in front of her family. It's never to be said on her property. And he said, it's just a word. She says, no. She says, no, it's hatred. Please don't use, you can't use that word. Please don't. Well, that's what we need to do. When we hear those things, speak up, stand up. And so the tragedy that occurred in Minneapolis, I just still heartbroken. And I really appreciate the work of Chris Rogers, and especially pointing out the need for the legislature to make these changes, because it's hard to understand, but that's what we are. We are an arm of the legislature. We do the state. The state tells us when to conduct hearings, the Board of Equalization, the timing, we have to get permission to extend it. We don't do laws, the city does them, all that sort of thing. Our responsibilities are pretty administrative. We're proud of what we do. We take care of people. You heard the report we had today from the women who are running that center. So this is a chance for us to take a tragedy, a real tragedy, and turn it into positive action. How do we change? What do we do? And this morning I was listening to television while I was getting dressed, and some interesting proposals, one of which was pretty fascinating. And I'm the commissioner that works with 911, so I'm going to be talking to Kathy Allen about this. But what it was this black man was talking about how when you call 911, there ought to be other services that, you ought to call 911 for, when you get through with police, fire, or rescue. You ought to say family problems, mental health, some other things that, I don't know what other categories, but other things so that they can refer them to someone who can help. The chaplain program is very active in Omaha. We have 13 chaplains that go out on call to help the people. Well, anyway, I guess the bottom line is that this is an opportunity for structural change. It's going to have to take place, and it should take place. And Levon Stennis sent me an email, and not one to, I guess to all of us, and Mary Ann contributed it back and forth, and she suggested it's time for us to hire felons. And it is. When a person makes a mistake, it doesn't mean they have to carry that load around forever. Can't find a job on account of it and all that thing. I think the government is the first place that should open the doors to people who've made mistakes. Lord knows I've made them.
Thank you. Commissioner Borgeson.
Thank you. And I want to start off by saying I, in no way, shape, or form, sit here and say that I can understand totally, because I can't, because I don't live in those shoes. But what I can say, and Commissioner Rogers, I hear your words, and I'm listening. And that's what I commit to doing, is to listen. Because I think for a long time, and I don't think it's a bad thing, I think that people from their hearts really wanted to try to fix things, but we haven't been able to do that. And so now is the time for us to sit back and to hear those words, and I'm probably going to say this a lot, but hear the words and listen to what they're saying before we react. And I'm sorry, your family and you had to endure that. And just know, the community, please just know that we are listening. We hear you and we are listening. And we're here to do whatever we can. But now is your time to step forward and tell us, rather than us reacting to things. Please step forward and tell us so that we can react to what you're telling us instead of to what we're doing.
Thank you, Commissioner Borges. Any other commissioner comments? If not, is there anybody from the public that would like to comment? This is open for public comment, as is every vote we ever take. This is your opportunity for public input before we vote, Larry.
Thank you. My comment is that this is not the place on the agenda for that, because what we've just heard, now, excuse me, in the spirit of reconciliation, the audience out there cannot see your reaction to me, and I don't like it. I don't like your reaction to Mr. Kavanaugh either, and sometimes to Mr. Boyle. Nobody calls you on it, but I will. All right. All lives matter. Words matter. Rules matter. Rules are being broken again today. It's not in the right place. It's a proclamation or a presentation. This is not the presentation for the citizens under your own rules. It says it's a resolution. Item B. This is a resolution confirming our committee. But let me say this. I'm 77 just yesterday, and I remember Martin Luther King. I remember his words, and I like Martin Luther King and his words. But I also remember what happened to his movement. Some bad actors. I've been referred to as a bad actor at this body or the other body. Some bad actors took over that movement. They started putting words in his mouth and words in our mouth. Now, I won't necessarily say that it was the total responsibility of Mr. Al Sharpton, Mr. Jesse Jackson, but that group of people that were right-hand people to him misused him and have misused black people and me, all citizens, ever since, to spew a message of hate that has divided us. I consider myself a citizen and a patriot. Not many other people do. When I say things like that, you think I'm a hater. I want to tell you the hate's coming from the other side, outside of this city, and some of it is from Black Lives Matters, but people deny that. But there are lots of sources on the internet that'll prove me right. George Soros, for example. How many millions of dollars did George Soros commit to Black Lives Matter? Look it up. And stop making us the enemy. We are not.
Commissioner Boyle for the floor.
Well, I just want to say something. I've been doing a lot of reading, a lot of soul searching, and I think the phrase "all lives matter" is inappropriate. Black lives do matter, and I didn't really pay attention to that slogan until this horrible murder took place. So I think we need to set the record straight. At least I will, for my own self, that I've begun signing all of my emails. Black lives do matter. And it's important because we need to say those things. Words will change the way we conduct our lives. So quit talking, you know, I'm not talking to the speaker, but all of us, as I've said before, need not to discriminate or to hate, that it comes, we need to talk positively and with a great deal of love and affection for our fellow human beings, and Black lives do matter.
And this is not citizen comments. This is talking about an agenda item, so it's fine to interact on this because it is on the agenda.
Thank you.
Luis.
And Commissioner Duda, when you have time, I'd like to speak.
Fine. You will be the next speaker, Commissioner Kraft, after Luis.
Thank you. Luis Jimenez, 3306 Burt Street. Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Duda. That's exactly right. This is not citizens' comments. This is another part of the agenda. Dismantling institutional and structural racism. Another way to say it is that racism is baked into the structure of this country, as a previous speaker has told this body. Yeah, there's all sorts of people coming out and supporting justice and moving away from injustice. And we all have ideas, and I honestly don't think we all know how to do that yet. How does dismantling look like? I looked at the resolution, and it's kind of like broad language, which it's probably appropriate in a resolution, but I think we need to move beyond broad statements and resolutions. I think that considering the root of poverty and other things that cause inequality, that magnify or intensify racial inequality as well. I don't know if the nonprofit setup that the county and the city often depend on to provide social services is something that we need to be doing all the time. Can't you guys or the city or local government look at financing services or creating services within your own subsidiaries, within your own subordinates, within your own setups and procedures? There's more accountability, I think, when there's work being done in a public sphere. Mr. Rogers, you said that some of these programs are being badmouthed. I'd like to get some clarification on that. I think people just want to see results on the ground, like something that results that are tangible. So I guess I'll leave this with you guys, that public officials need to look at how they can lower costs and increase income for the people that they represent, the residents of Douglas County, people that live in Omaha. We know how to lower costs. Oftentimes we say cut taxes, let's lower costs. Do we know how to increase incomes for people? What kind of economy can we create for our local citizenry? That's something I'm trying to figure out. It's kind of, you know, as a young person, it's kind of hard to understand how money flows. But people in the lower parts of our community need money. People need to get paid. People need money. And I think that once people in need have opportunities to increase their incomes, however that may be, you're going to see a lot of problems go away. I know personally when I started making money, so a lot of my problems went away. Chris Sturm would tell me, Luis, you're coming to city council, you should be focusing on a career. That was like 4 years ago. Well, then a year ago, I started getting paid for being civically engaged, and he's not telling me to go find a career now. He sees that I've improved. Money improves people. Systems and setups aren't necessarily isn't the answer always. But a lot of times when you have money, you can resolve a lot of things. Stress, my stress went down a lot when I started getting paid. Anyway, these are my thoughts, because dismantling is a good rallying call, but I don't necessarily want to see things being taken apart, torn down. So what are we going to do to lower costs and increase incomes for people?
Thank you, Luis. Commissioner Kraft.
Yes, I'd like to say right on to Commissioner Boyle and Rogers, and I thank them for bringing this forward. And I plan to enthusiastically vote yes. Back when I started working for my father, 1959, I was in junior high. I'd go down every weekend. My father made very clear to our employees that we would not tolerate any derogatory comments, any ethnic slurs. And he would not tolerate them not only from our employees, because we employed Native Americans, Hispanic, Black, people from foreign countries, not only from our employees, but also from our customers. We would lose a sale by asking a customer to leave if they made a racial slur. And I'm very proud of those stances my father took, and I continued those when I took over in 1972. So employers also have a responsibility to enforce with their employees, not tolerating racial discrimination or intimidation. And that is part of the system that we need to change, because I've seen employers tolerate it. Thank you.
Commissioner Rogers. Oh, is Chris on?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me, to Louise's point, he pointed out, what do you mean by programming? The programming, when I say affirmative action, and I mean bad mouthing, it is, for instance, affirmative action got tainted so bad that we had to go to diversity. And it got tainted so bad because you had people saying that because you gave extra consideration to people of color, they really didn't earn it. The only reason they got it is because they were Black. You had the code word of quota systems. And that's how you got to, that's what I mean when bad mouthing the program. When intent, it was just a fact of evil to level the playing field. So the program got bad mouthed in that way. Now everything that you're seeing out there in the street is all in regards to that. So that's what I mean the program, not programs in general, affirmative action itself. And I'm gonna just lastly say, Larry, I can get into your argument, but I'm gonna tell you that, you wear your patriot hat. And I'm proud to be an American. I wouldn't be in no other country, but the country's not perfect. But you sit here and talk about your country that's built on the back of Black folk, a railroad lines that's built on the back of Chinese people, and a farming industry that would go to hell if it wasn't for Latinos. So the fact is, when I say there's structural inequality there, those are the things that hide behind the flag sometimes. And it's not perfect, but we are the best place here to be. And the fact is that dismantling all this is all a quest to make us live up to those constitutional values. And at this time, to say that we've lived up to them to 100% is totally false. So nobody's blaming you, but you definitely in the game now. And if you say, oh, you are, then you need to get in and play. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rogers. I also would like, before we vote, I would like to mention Commissioner Kavanaugh, of course, is not able to join us today for personal reasons, had something come up within his family. But he feels real strongly on this issue, and even though he can't vote on it, he absolutely wants to make sure the world knows he is supportive, that he is wholly supportive of this resolution. So just want to, I guess that's not really for the record, it's just kind of sharing with the world that he wanted everybody to know of his support for this particular resolution. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank Chris Rogers for his words that he just said. Really important words. And thank you for that, really.
Yep. We're lucky to have him, absolutely. Okay, with that, I'm hoping we're ready to vote. Mr. Esch, would you please call the vote?
I enthusiastically vote yes.
There's no enthusiastic button. Yes or no? Commissioner Boyle.
Motion passes 6-0, 5 voting yes in person, 1 virtually.
The remarks that Commissioner Rogers made really struck a chord, and he really covered it so well with the ethnic groups that are responsible for building this nation and keeping it operating. It brought a memory back to me that when the Senator Chambers presented the bills to require the city council to be by district and the school board by district, that surprisingly to me, he said the election I got the census figures and put things together and drew the boundaries. And there was a way that reporters called from the World Herald that you knew that they didn't want to ask this question. And so the way they put it was, my editor asked me to ask this question. So I knew that it was going to be a dandy. Well, it was. So Dave Thompson, God rest his soul, from my mother's hometown, Maquoketa, Iowa, said to me, he said, the editor wants to know if there will be a black person on the city council. Well, to be candid, when I drew the boundaries, that's the first district I drew to make sure that it was compact and contiguous and would produce minority representation. Okay, that was I did that. So the answer was yes, but what I said to him, and a quick response was, you know, there might even be an Irishman. And he was Irish, and he started laughing, and that's what he put in the paper. But that's diffusing these negative, God, do you think there'll be one? Be one? And so I just turned it around and said, yeah, there might even be an Irishman. I didn't say yes or no. I said, there might even be an Irishman. And he loved the quote, and he printed it that way, and it was never answered. It should not have been answered. Thanks, Chris.
Next on the agenda, we will come back to.
Point of order? Did I hear you call for a vote on that? Yep.
We've already voted. Larry, we're moving on to the next item. I don't need.
This is a point of order. Your own rules don't say anything about conducting a vote during a presentation. Maybe you're violating.
Okay, you are now out of order, Larry. Thank you for your input. We are moving.
Might not be a valid vote. Under the rules, it might not be valid. Yes, sir.
Okay, next on the agenda, discussion regarding proposed CARES Act allocations and expenditures. As I've mentioned, this is going to be, this is a big deal, of course, as we all know, and will be on our agenda every week for updates. Where we are now, the contract with Deloitte Touche, we were not able to get it through all the attorneys. Teresa's holding her head down. She told me a week ago, probably wouldn't be ready for today, but I asked her to try anyway. But by next week, we should be, I hope, we're trying for next week. I do not want this board to take any action until we have our accountant on board to help us make sure that we are setting things up right, that we get some backup on our actions as we move forward. So that, in my mind, that has to be the first step before any action is taken. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean we cannot begin discussion. And so we are beginning that discussion today. We have put, you're not gonna get called on for a while here, Luis. We have begun putting together figures, and I will ask Joe Lorenz to go over that a little bit, but I'll talk more about the process than I will the figures. If we are successful in, and if this board chooses, it obviously is not my decision, but if this board chooses to sign a contract with Deloitte Touche, hopefully as early as next week. Once we have done that and we can talk to them and get their input, I think we potentially could consider taking public action as soon as a week after. So best case scenario, we could get Deloitte Touche on by next week, and potentially we could consider starting some of the beginning funding then in 2 weeks. We don't have to, but we could, at least as far as I am concerned. And so we're putting out for discussion now some of the possibilities of how we would see this program moving forward. No intention of taking any action today, no action next week other than a contract with Deloitte Touche. But in terms of allocation of dollars, I am not going to be comfortable taking action until 2 weeks from now, assuming we can get Deloitte Touche on board next week. So that's kind of the process as we're moving forward. There's Joe, hiding behind the mask. So with that, I would ask Joe Lorenz to come up to explain a little bit of what is in this first draft of a proposal.
Okay, Commissioners. As County Finance Director, I've kind of been charged with being the gatekeeper on this CARES Act funding. So initially I worked with the Treasury Department and made sure we had all the forms in place, and we had transferred $166 million that's in the county's possession right now. Since then, I've spent a lot of time on calls with the federal government, conference calls with the federal government, with the National Association of Counties, trying to understand the guidance that's coming out to make sure that as we proceed on this, that we're going to be compliant, which is absolutely essential given the way the CARES Act is written. And over the last week or two, I've been actually spending a lot of time with the governor's cabinet, given that we've made the decision that as the two entities in the state of Nebraska, Douglas County and the state of Nebraska, who received CARES Act money, that we would take a consistent approach in following the guidance and working together. So we're both, looks like we're both going to hire Deloitte as our consultant, who brings a lot of things to the table, including they have the ability to allow us to maximize the proceeds we receive, not only from the CARES Act, but through FEMA and other government programs, so that we make sure that we get everything we're eligible for, to have a consistent place to put the data when, and it's not a matter in my mind of if, but when the Inspector General comes to audit us, that we've used this money appropriately, and also just other technical assistance that they can give us. So that's really the benefits of working with Deloitte that we're moving towards, and hopefully, as Commissioner Duda said, by next week we'll have that in place and can move forward. So with that, I want to kind of take the commissioners through. We talked a little bit. I got direction from Commissioner Duda. I talked to Commissioner Borgensen, who, as chair of the trustees of the Douglas County Health Department, Health Center, and actually from Commissioner Rogers, who's head of the Douglas County Board of Health. And so I got direction from them as to their vision of spending this money. But I think also importantly, I spoke to all the commissioners and kind of got a uniform message to them that we want to spend this $166 million in a way that creates the best value and benefits to all 575,000 residents of Douglas County. So we're really trying to take that approach as we go through it. And with that, I like to kind of just bring everyone through our initial thinking as we put together can we switch to this? A diagram. Let's see here if I can do this. Is that clear enough for people? Can they read that? Can they read that? So this is our first attempt. This is not, locked in stone or anything like this, but this is how our vision as it stands today of how that $166 million would be allocated. Under county government, Douglas County here, we've identified capital projects and equipment purchases of $55 million that we would see meet needs that have been incurred from the pandemic and identified to us. About 41 million of that would be major capital projects that when I'm done, the gentlemen from Public Properties are going to come and talk about in more detail. And then there's about $14 million of equipment that various county departments and offices have identified that would help them to deal with issues raised by the pandemic. And then to date, there's been about $10 million of costs reimbursements identified that county groups and also including the Public Building Commission and .com have identified as costs they've incurred directly as a result of the pandemic. And I'll go through that in a little bit more detail too. The second category would be other government. You can see this is where we've identified preliminarily $25 million of our funding that we would provide to the city of Omaha. In discussions with the state of Nebraska, they have said they're willing, they want to work with us as partners in this. So we've kind of identified, are hoping and are I think leaning towards doing a 50-50 split where both the state and the county would contribute 50% of qualified costs from the city of Omaha. And how this $25 million has arrived is based on the initial thinking and the interpretation from the state, which is a matter of fact I'll talk a little bit about now. This is the guidance that the governor issued for their $100 million of CARES Act money to go to local governments. And you can see that it calls for necessary expenditures for PP&E, for equipment, for temp. I think it was in your book.
Well, I don't get a book.
Oh.
I've got it on the screen.
Sorry,
Okay.
I thought you had a book.
Okay.
But I can give that to you.
That's okay. I get it on the computer. I don't use the paper.
Okay. So these are the costs, like I said, that the governor's identified. Things like medical transportation expenses for sanitizing areas, emergency staffing for staff dedicated to the COVID-19 pandemic, public health emergency. And the next point is one that we and the state have both come to agreement on that we think is consistent with the guidance that's been issued, that payroll costs for public health and public safety employees for services dedicated to mitigating or responding to the COVID-19 public health emergency. And the important three words there, no presumption permitted. What this really means is our interpretation is that these costs incurred for public health and public safety have to be directly incurred in dealing with the pandemic. That we don't feel the law is really gives the guidelines or the purpose that total cost of our sheriff's department or a total police department would be eligible, that it really has to be costs that are specifically identified as dealing with the pandemic, and that's the criteria that we're using. And both the state and us feel that that's the appropriate way. And then as the governor highlighted here, that Douglas County and local political subdivisions, excluding the city of Omaha, within Douglas County are ineligible for reimbursement pursuant to this program. So that's really saying what we think is going to work out is that the state and Douglas County would split the reimbursements to the city of Omaha, but within Douglas County, the other local cities and agencies, rural fire and things like that, Douglas County would be responsible for in funding from our CARES Act money. So that's kind of the key point that we're consistent with in.
Before you leave that,
sure.
Pull that back up for just the statement you're talking about right now, that's added there. My thinking is, I'm thinking about the utilities, MUD and OPPD. These are issues that are still outstanding, and we don't know how we're going to move forward. And I'm afraid that statement, local political subdivisions within Douglas County are ineligible for reimbursement. I don't know where that statement came from, but
this was the governor's slide.
I get that, but I think that's just him declaring that they are ineligible, and I worry about the utilities because they are in Douglas County, and I'm hoping that the state is going to provide funding for them.
And in our assumption, we've talked about that we thought it would, our interpretation is that these are government entities entirely encompassed within Douglas County, as opposed to these utilities which service multiple counties. So that's our interpretation, but as you know, since you've been in the point in a lot of discussions with the governor, that we haven't finalized all these exact terms. We have basic agreement, but that's one that has to be further negotiated and agreed upon.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to make sure they're not being excluded by that. Commissioner Morrison.
I just wanted to make a clarifying point that that particular slide was from the governor's PowerPoint, not in our packet, which I think Sean, our lobbyist, had sent that at one point, but I'm trying to find it, so I'll send it to you.
I'm just curious why I don't have it. I have this on my screen, but I don't have that. Did you get one of those things from Sean?
I think we all did when the governor did his press conference and went through his PowerPoint that day. Sean sent it out to us either that afternoon or the following day. But I'll find it and make sure you have a copy of it.
Thank you.
And in my discussions with the members of the governor's cabinet, that's pretty representative of their point of view. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so basically, just real quick, how we get to that 25 million for the city of Omaha. I think at one point they said that under these rules, which are more restrictive than their original proposal, they said they were incurring about $5 million a month in COVID-19 related cost. And this covers the period from March 1st to December 30th. So that's 10 months at $5 million a month or $50 million. That the assumption here is we would split evenly with the state 50-50, which would mean $25 million of Douglas County CARES Act funds would be used to reimburse the city of Omaha for those expenses. Okay. Then there's other government and rural fire districts, which are, the other cities within Douglas County and rural fire districts that we will ask them all to submit their list of what they believe are qualified expenses for us, along with the consultant to review. And also, we're making this inclusive so that we're including kind of the joint ventures between the city and the county, like the building commission and joint and .com, that we would incur their COVID-related expenses, which should total about $35 million. We've also identified that there is a necessary use for this money for agencies, particularly those offering rent assistance. We're going to preliminarily allocate $10 million for that. We're going to run some of that through the General Assistance Unit of Douglas County, which deals with rent assistance, but the thinking is that we're not fully equipped to do this, so in working with them, we may contract with someone to fully administer that program. And we've also are preliminarily allocating $10 million to nonprofits within Douglas County to deal with community issues, including homelessness and other things. Although all these issues must meet the guidelines of the CARES Act and be able to have some sort of nexus back to the COVID-19 public health emergency. So that's about $20 million. And given that this program is supposed to last through December 30th, we're keeping about $46 million in reserve for other projects and needs that come up. I did get just a message this morning that the Douglas County Health Department has not submitted their list of potential ideas which they think could be significant. And so we're just giving ourselves some flexibility here and keeping some money back to see other costs that would arise over the remaining 7 months that we have to administer this money. So that's the basic thinking. This is all still preliminary, and at the end of the day, you as commissioners will have the final decision and direction about how the money gets spent.
Thank you, Joe. Commissioner Boyle.
Joe, I appreciate the presentation. I'm not sure I agree with all the figures, but some
They're
of
all
them
preliminary.
Yeah, I understand. And the nonprofits, 10 million, that's, last week I asked the question of the chair is, who is qualified to ask for money? What's their status? Who are they? And do they have to be nonprofits or can they be whatever? And the other one was how do they apply? So those are still two questions that are out there that I got asked as recently as yesterday again by a couple of people. One of the things I'm concerned about is this agencies for $10 million for, I guess you said for rent assistance and possibly the mortgage, people who have lost mortgages. But I sure would like to see that applied to small business as well. I mean, really, really small, the mom and pop with a granddaughter working or something like that, and who knows what it is. But people that have really been hit and haven't gotten any of this other grant money from the federal government because they don't have relationships with banks, But I do want to, the nonprofits I'm concerned about because I'm not sure that's enough. I'll just say that right now. But and I went through the list here and I'm kind of curious. I'll talk to you about them too, but some that I don't really see being related to COVID. But and I know there has to be a nexus. So. But that's my initial comment. It's a lot of work you did, and I appreciate what you did. And so now it's our job to tear it apart. No, it isn't. It's our job to work with you and get something put together. And we need to listen to what the people have to say too at some point.
Right.
Thank you.
So can I get back on this? I got a couple more charts to show you real quickly. The first one, you do have copies of this. This is all what I've received to date from the various departments and the building commission and .com about reimbursable direct COVID-19 related expenses. And to date, we've received about 2.3 million of those. And these are costs that I think we'll be able to move on fairly quickly, just make sure that they meet the guidance criteria. And so this is what I would envision that you all would be able to hopefully move on still sometime in June about okaying these expenses so we could start to put these through. I think those, like I said, are straightforward. And my last chart is just, these are projects or wish list that I've received from the various different departments. The major one here, which the folks from Public Properties are going to come and bring you through, is about a $41.5 million expenditure, primarily for capital upgrades at the Douglas County Health Center and Corrections area, both 24/7 operations that as we've gone through this pandemic, Needs have been identified. As you well know, we had a COVID-19 outbreak at the health center that resulted in actual deaths of patients and several employees getting seriously ill. And they're going to take you through about what we can do to remedy that so that would not occur in the future. And also, as Mike Myers has talked about, the jail, given that they could have 12 or 1,300 inmates moving in and out, some of whom are in a marginalized position. There's been projects identified there that could help us minimize the risk of this and any future pandemics. And that's the major one. And then there's still about another 14 or 15 million dollars of potential projects identified by the different groups that they think would meet the COVID criteria. And that, of course, will have to be reviewed by the commissioners and see which ones we think not only qualify, but do meet our standards of really creating value for the people of Douglas County. And that's basically my update for today. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. If not, I'd ask the public properties people to come down and share some more detail with you about those major projects they're want to get moving on.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Oh, it's Commissioner Borgeson.
I don't necessarily think, Mr. Chair, I don't have a question for Joe, but I want to get on my soapbox for just a second, which I know Commissioner Dude is shaking his head, but so, you know, during this pandemic, I think what's been lost is the fact that county governments are on the front line of this. From our first responders to our last responders and everybody in between. And we have not only 8 other elected officials offices that we are responsible for. We have 16 departments, and 7 of those, or 6 of those are 24/7. And again, our first responders during this pandemic are truly, it is our health department. And our healthcare workers, not only just in the long-term care, our community mental health center, our general assistance primary healthcare clinic, and our corrections and our youth center. Those are the folks that are on the front line of this pandemic, 24/7. And so I just, again, it frustrates me that everybody seems to think that we're just sitting back here, you know, with a fat bank account, not worrying about anything, but we have lots of things to worry about. We have lots of capital expenditures we need to worry about because we are taking care of people 24/7. And as Mr. Lorenz put so great, in a facility with some of our most vulnerable and precious population that we serve in this county in our long-term care facility, where we did have an outbreak, both with residents and staff, where we did have people that unfortunately passed away. And we are going to do what's right with that facility to make sure that when we get this second round, we even do better than we did the first time around. And so I'm sorry that I had to get on my soapbox, but you know, there is more to things in this community, and county government, again, is those on the front line doing the jobs that need to be done through this pandemic.
Thank you, Commissioner Borgeson. Commissioner Boyle.
Well, I would like to say that I hope there's room for me on your soapbox. I agree totally with what you said. And I really think that's a great focus for us when we think about this money. The one other thing that I want to mention that I hear so often, and I think has been occurring in our community as it has around the world for that matter, is mental health problems. And I think we need to, and it's not only people who are in criminal facilities and those sorts of things, but it's people, you see ads on TV about calling for help and so forth. I think we need to start thinking seriously about breaking ground for a mental health hospital somewhere, maybe adjoining a present facility, maybe doing something with Community Alliance or Hope or somebody, but getting in there and getting some things put together where people can come and get mental health help.
Yeah,
I'd like to get that up. I'd like to get that up on the radar.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, Joe or Jeff or Jerry? Oh, yes, thank you all. Thanks, Joe. Now look out. drill down a little bit on the public properties projects.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning, Jerry.
Jerry Leahy, Public Property. Back in March, when this all was obviously going to become a congressional act to help communities with the dealings of the COVID-19, we knew we had two facilities that would be vulnerable to COVID-19, being the Douglas County Health Center with 240 patients, residents, and obviously the Douglas County Corrections group that has an average population of roughly 1,100. I thought I heard Mike say this morning. But so what we have done in the past with both of those facilities has been, we've kind of tracked capital improvements that we could utilize to improve the facilities. So when this came into play with the horrible, vulnerable folks at the health center and nationwide in long-term care, we knew that everything that we would put together as a package, we felt would qualify. And just a brief sample of what we did, I think late March, we identified some of the rooms that could be, if we could remove the air, get the negative air out. On I believe it was a Friday, we found an outlet in New York, of all places, with what was going on. And we bought 5 negative air machines. We received them on Monday. Our staff at the health center, along with Aaron Nelson and the administration, placed these negative air machines in these rooms, and I think really slowed that spread. It's bad enough that it was there, but I think it was an improvement. But it proves to me and Jeff, I think, that the items that are on this list, we call this the A list. We believe that all of these items, capital improvements at both locations, will qualify, and that's why we wanted to give you at least a sharing of what we've been doing to prepare to engage in expenditures of this kind with a deadline of December 30. It's difficult, but one of the things we can do, we can direct purchase for air handlers and boilers and things of that nature. So, the A list is before you today. As Joe mentioned, kind of the first take on the expenditures of the CARES Act monies. And we do have more, but I think we'll feel more comfortable once we get Deloitte Touche on board. So then it's not so much Patrick, Joe, Jerry, Jeff making a decision before we come to you, but a firm that can say, this qualifies, this one does not qualify. So I'm going to leave it at that. If you want Jeff to drill down on these items, but there's some wonderful improvements here that will help and are also, obviously qualify for the next pandemic without a name or a number.
One thing that's a little different on this than some of the other projects, in a lot of cases we're reimbursing costs that entities have already incurred. In this case, we're looking at how can we be better prepared for the next go-around.
Yes.
But these are capital improvements that have to be done this year to qualify. And so when we look at our time frame for how we want to move forward, these are the things that if we're any of these that we may want to do, we probably ought to be making that decision within the next few weeks so they can get going and have them done this year. So some of the funding we'll be leaving till late in the year until we get a better picture of what everybody's real needs are. Some of these things we want to get out of the box a little bit early with. So possibly we might consider all or part of this list within 2 weeks, I hope.
Jeff McGill, Public Properties, that's a great point. An air handler, for example, takes 4 months to get here. So if you start now, we have about 2 months worth of construction to get it installed. So it is critical to get started on these items. Just to add what Jerry said, we looked at how we can be better suited for the next pandemic. So we call it, we're trying to increase and be ready for the next step. And a lot of this is the infrastructure that goes with it. Air handlers are very important. We want 100% outside air, and we don't want to return the air that's in the building or facilities that currently exist. We're pretty well set with the current project that's going on at the Correction Center, that all the new air handlers there have that capability. But there's 8 air handlers at the health center that we need to address to minimize risk. The other things that are on there is some lighting. There's a new UV lighting that's out there. It doesn't kill coronavirus, but it kills bacteria in the air and on surfaces. So we're going to take a look at that. Automatic faucets in patients' rooms and nurse stations, so we don't have to touch things. The main entrance at the health center, right now everybody's coming in the front, getting their temperature checked. We're trying to make a separation there. People coming in for staging, get their temperature, they go on by, and then they leave in another direction. And we'll have a separation wall. It increases the control and also security. We're thinking about maintaining security there so we know who's in the building and when they leave. We also have been talking about some overnight stay rooms for staff. Erin Nelson, she made some great comments about in another state they had 60-some rooms that they maintain staff at their facility. So I believe we can have about 9 rooms if that's a consideration. So that's kind of a brief summary. We're also looking at some whirlpool improvements at the health center. There's, I think, 10 of them total. Some of the rooms do not have the capability to shower, so the whirlpool rooms are very in demand and needed. So with that, I'll leave you with that.
Any commissioners have questions for Commissioner Morgan?
Be sure, you mentioned it'll take 4 months once you order that.
Yes, we've checked it out already. We're going to direct buy, like Jerry said, the units, and then the contractor will receive them. And like I said, this A-list that we call it, we may not be able to achieve all the goals on it. It's a lot of money, and we're diving in and trying to find the timing situation. But we can direct purchase. Units will be here in 4 months, and the design period and all that, we'll have to bid and get the contractors on board, so it's a tight schedule.
Okay, and I think, Claire, this is good to have these kind of discussions and updates on a regular weekly basis, so it's good that anyone can speak to it and we're not meeting in executive session talking about it, so it's great. And thank you and Jerry very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle?
Yes, I appreciate the list that you put together, and of course, I have some questions on it, but I was looking at one that is, I don't know what this is on, what page or anything else to see. I guess it's an A list, and it must be page 2. Yeah, it is page 2. Thank you for numbering them. Down in this category, replace lighting in patient care spaces and all that sort of thing. And it's a $3.6 million expenditure. And who was going to say, yeah, this qualifies? Who says that?
I think Deloitte we'll present the information to Deloitte Touche, and I'm not sure it's gonna qualify.
Okay.
It kills bacteria, it doesn't
does?
kill.
Okay.
Yes,
These are UV lights. to kill
UV
bacteria.
lights,
But it doesn't do COVID.
correct.
Okay.
But
All
it'll
right,
help the environment.
And then there's another one that kind of caught my eyes. The first one on page 1 at the top, it's a new fuel storage tank and removal of existing underground tank for $160,000, and then the next one is replace the boiler for $550,000. Again, I guess I don't see those necessarily as related to what's happened. But I mean,
It's just part of the infrastructure,
Okay.
heating and cooling for the facilities.
What's that?
It's part of the infrastructure for heating and cooling
yeah,
for
I
the
understand.
facilities.
But I don't see how it's necessarily.
It may not be.
Yeah, all right.
Yep.
And so I guess what I'm trying to do is scrounge some money. I want to see a mental health hospital start up. We've got so many calls about that, and we've got an opportunity, I think, with the UNMC to do something about it. And I when it comes to replacing a steam boiler, I don't know, it doesn't really make me that excited, but the possibility of doing something to serve people who have suffering from mental illness that we hear about all the time. I recently heard from a mother who has a son who's mentally ill, and she is constantly, she's in a battle with him all the time, and he's in trouble in and out. And it's one of these days, we've had some people, well, we've had some disasters over at corrections once in a while, not often, but people who get under our control, and they won't even tell us what their meds are, they won't tell us anything. And we had one woman who had a serious illness and we didn't even know it. And she didn't survive. And I shouldn't bring it up, but anyway, that's the sort of stuff that bothers me, parents that are trying to deal with children and they don't know what to do with them. I was talking to a police officer, the head of the union for the cops, and he was telling me about a family that was disintegrating, and two big boys and young men and a mother, and God, they were using this horrible language to her and all this stuff, and one of the kids slapped her and slugged her. So the cops were called, and so anyway, they ended up taking him, and then they brought him back to the house, and she says, I don't want him. And he said, well, if you don't take care of him, I'm going to charge you with neglect. I mean, it's just, we got to figure this out. This is part of that solution, and it was a black family. This is the sort of thing that they're struggling with, and we got to figure that out. And I like boilers, they're fine, but when it comes to that or the people, I'm for helping people first.
Thank you. I will point out the idea of the possibility of a new community mental health center or something to let people spread out more within the health center was briefly explored, but we can't, there's no way you can have it done this year.
Well, I think.
And everything has to be done this year.
I'm not sure that's true. I think if you get a contract, break ground, all that sort of stuff, and get the state to contribute, I don't know, maybe there is. I mean,
Well, so far it looks, I'm not saying that we give up, but so far it's looked like we would not be able to do that. We'll continue looking at all possibilities.
Maybe Congressman Eastman can help us with, Congressman Bacon can help us with it.
Commissioner Boyle, we did look at a facility, new facility, mental health.
Oh, you did?
And we have some costs prepared.
I can't hear you.
We have some costs, we're working on some costs for a new facility. But again, it gets tied to the end of the year, spending the money.
Well, I think we need to get that worked out now. I mean, I think we ought to get some information we ought to have an amendment of some sort, ask our members of Congress to get them, just like they did there were other things that they talked to him about, trying to get straightened out, so that they could use money for other things, like the city was after him for something. I wasn't paying attention to it, but in any event, we ought to ask for a change allowing us to do that. We really do, because, I just think we need to. That's all I can tell you. And I'll work on it as soon as I leave this meeting.
I think when we're dealing with federal issues,
Yeah.
it generally is easier to follow the rules than to try to get them changed.
Well, I think this needs to be amended so that we can do something good with it instead of doing a boiler, we need to do a mental health facility that can help families, something. Okay? Maybe we can find to do it without having to build a facility.
Well, but these do have to be COVID related, and
Yeah,
I mean,
this
we've
is.
had we have had, unfortunately, 6 deaths out of the health center from our residents. I mean, this is a very serious issue, and.
But I agree with you, but I don't think putting in a new boiler, where's the boiler house anyway? Where is that? Is that over on 42nd Street?
Yeah, it serves the health center.
Okay, well, I just don't, I mean, I don't know, I think, you know, mental health is certainly a big item, and I would certainly go
Agreed.
for that. I mean, really, and it doesn't have to be this or that. I think we need to get this moving, and we need to be committed to it.
Fine.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Thanks for.
You can view it as agreeing or not arguing. Either way, semantics.
Not arguing. Thanks. Hey, thanks, gentlemen.
Yes, this is, I see a quizzical, some eyes above a mask. This is, and every week is opportunity for any public input as well. And we welcome public input as we move along. So this is, if there's anybody from the public that wishes to share any thoughts, this is your opportunity. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Commissioners. Doug Kagan, 416 South 130th Street, representing Nebraska Taxpayers for Freedom. We have both concerns and questions about the county proposed CARES Act funding. Most of the allocations go to government entities. Fine. However, $20 million apparently is going to private agencies and nonprofits. We object to dispensing funds to the latter because whereas taxpayers can appear before local government bodies like the county to express opinions on their spending CARES Act dollars, taxpayers have no control over how private agencies and nonprofits expend their allocations. Such situation sparks our concern about this funding, subsidizing perhaps illegal aliens and those who otherwise could obtain rental and other assistance from regular welfare sources. Furthermore, the background pages on the meeting agenda are confusing, and we realize the pages are preliminary only. Under Budget Adjustment General Fund on one sheet, a $300,000 amount listed for public properties. On another sheet, the same heading listed with the $41.6 million amount. One sheet lists the total amount of $52,679,000 for additional county expenses, but on another sheet, a total of $65 million for county government CARES expenses. Reconciling these figures on one document would assist us taxpayers. Also, the County A list includes items such as a new fuel storage tank and new boiler plus parts, items for a chiller plant, juvenile court mobile carts, and a payroll application. Items we consider questionable CARES Act expenses unless they can be explained to us. Taxpayers do not want to see CARES Act dollars paying for items conveniently crammed into a, quote, wants list. Only taxpayer dollars, excuse me, only taxpayer dollars spent on legitimate coronavirus expenses like first responders. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Anybody else? Good morning, Roger.
Morning. Yeah. Take the mask off here. All right, Roger Garcia, 3635 Olin Avenue. First, I commend the board and your staff for starting to set the vision with details and delineate, where these funds can go towards in regards to your own internal expenses at the county, other local government entities, et cetera. So that is obviously a step in the right direction, along similar lines of Commissioner Boyle and trying to ensure that these funds also go to people that are hurting or in need in the community. I did have a few examples to bring up. I looked at what other counties are doing across the nation in regards specifically to COVID, or rather CARES Act funds that go to counties specifically. And so along the lines of helping people and what other counties are doing, I looked at Hillsborough County in Florida, where Tampa is, and they had a few good examples, one of which was a workforce training program for people that have lost their job during COVID specifically. We know that a lot of hourly employees, hospitality, restaurant workers, a lot of them have lost their jobs. So there's a specific workforce training program for those employees affected by COVID to learn a new skill, a new trade, and get a job hopefully in the near future during this crisis, this pandemic. So that's one example, and here's Burrough County. Also, I would look at Jefferson County in Colorado. They have a really good online application for nonprofits and for small businesses. On the nonprofit side, people who are specifically case managing and assisting people who have been affected by COVID, for example, to help them find a job, or if they don't have health insurance, to help them get medical services during this time if they need to see a doctor, especially as it relates to COVID symptoms, et cetera. So I would look at their online application. It's a really good example. It's concise, but I think still has what a county needs in regards to accountability. For example, it asks for the nonprofit's latest 990, which is a nonprofit's tax report annually. It asks them to affirm that they're in good standing with the state's Secretary of State for their nonprofit status. You could also ask if that nonprofit is in good standing with the IRS, which is obviously important. And you could even ask for an external audit, because any good nonprofit that's knows how to handle funds, especially federal funds, has gone through either an external audit or an external financial review by an auditing firm. So those are all things you can definitely ask to that accountability commentary that we just heard. I'm a nonprofit professional by trade, 15 years in the service in regards to nonprofits. And any nonprofit that's handling federal funds knows that every penny has to be accounted for. You have to provide receipts, invoices, purchase orders, et cetera. So they're not just going to randomly go use them however they want. Obviously, they're going to report to you as the county and provide receipts for everything. And so anyway, to summarize, Jefferson County, Colorado, they also have a really good small business application for small businesses that are in need during COVID and have been affected by COVID directly. I believe in that county, they're giving upwards of $5,000 grants to small businesses to help them get through this crisis. In Orange County, they also have an online application where they're providing up to $10,000 for small businesses and up towards $1,000 for individuals that have been affected by COVID, either by losing their job, rental assistance, et cetera. So I'm sure a larger county like Orange County has more funds to utilize during this time. So I'm not saying that Douglas County can do 10,000 here and 1,000 there, but these three are good examples of how other counties are using specifically CARES Act money to help people directly. And so I just wanted to give those examples today as, like I said, I think Commissioner Boyle was on point when he said, some of these capital improvements perhaps are necessary. Like, for example, there was a lot of HVAC systems in there. I counted like 5, I think, in the A list. And perhaps we could argue that the negative airflow and, improving air quality obviously is important at the health center and other places. So I'm not saying those are unjustified. But, once you see a lot of boilers in there and a lot of things like that, improved lighting systems maybe are nice to have, but not necessarily essential. And especially when you can balance out some of those funds with helping people directly. And so with that being said, I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Roger. Well, before I even, stay up a second, Roger, we're not done with you yet. What you're talking about on these applications, that's absolutely where I hope we end up. And again, I'm hoping Deloitte Touche can play a role in helping us structure that. But that kind of a portal is exactly what I'm looking for. Now, whether or not we wish to go to small business is a decision of this board, and we really haven't had much discussion on that yet.
Yeah.
So, with that, Commissioner Boyle.
Roger, thanks. Thank you, Roger, for speaking up in the presentation. Was Orange County, is it California or somewhere else?
This Orange County would be California, yep.
California, okay.
And then
good.
Jefferson County, Colorado,
Yeah.
and Hillsborough, in Florida.
It was very useful, and I think those are really good suggestions, and we'll definitely look those up. So thank you for taking the time to speak.
Yep, definitely.
Thanks, Roger.
Thank you. As far as the online portal, I really recommend looking at Jefferson County. It's very good.
I'd be happy to do so because I want to end up with some kind of online portal. So, sounds good.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Thanks.
Anybody else wishing to share with this board? If not, you will get another opportunity next week, or the week after, or the week after. This is going to be a long-standing issue, but it's also a wonderful opportunity for us to help meet some very serious needs. So I'm excited to see it move forward. Okay.
2 questions.
Oh, who may apply and how do they apply? These are the logistics. I don't have the answer yet. And as to who, I mean, we've got in here nonprofits, but again, that decision has not been made by this board that we actually want to do that. And if so, what's the process? These are the decisions this board has to make as we move forward.
The reason that I'm asking about that is that the nonprofits are the primary, I think, I don't want to duplicate anything, I think the agencies and the nonprofits are the ones that really deliver services to individuals, as Roger brought up, and that's what I'm concerned about. I don't want to, and I know that there's some permanent services through general assistance, but this is for, I got a call yesterday asking for $100,000 for South Omaha, and we've already gotten them 10,000 masks, but that's not enough. Chris took care of that for me. But there's so much need out there for individuals, multi-generational families living together, someone working at the packing house. This is a terrible situation, and they're out there and they need help. There's mom and pop stores. I think we need to figure out how to work through, there's an organization called Match.
Right.
That gives out, I think it has 14 agencies that it funds, and we ought to be working with them, and we ought to call them, but anyway, that's how we're supposed to give, I think the easiest way to give money is through these nonprofits, frankly.
Fine, very good.
So anyway.
Okay, good thoughts, thank you. Anything else for the good of the cause today? If not, stay tuned, we'll be back next week, hopefully with a contract from Deloitte Touche to consider. Okay, that concludes presentations. Next on the agenda is a public hearing. We will open this public hearing. This is to provide additional budget dollars for budget increases for employee fringe benefits, public properties, election commissioner, and records imaging. 6A. In addition, increased budgets for county administration, health center, and community mental health center for expenditures of CARES Act and other COVID-19 related funding from federal government to the tune of $52 million. Where'd Joe?
Right here.
There, Joe. Surprise, surprise, looking for you. Tell us more, Joe.
Okay. As you know, twice a year we come for budget supplements where we add money to the original approved budget for the various departments that either have labor contracts or projects that have come up. And what we do this one on the second one is we generally come up with the departments that need some funds to get them through the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. And literally to make their payrolls, make sure they have the budget to do that. So that's what this one is, with one other pretty significant additional factor here, and that's the $50 million. And let me just explain that. We did receive $166 million of CARES Act money, but statutorily, before we can begin to spend it, we have to budget for it. And so the assumption we've just made here, as Commissioner Duda said, is that we hope in sometime by the latter part of this month in June that the county board begins to make decisions on how the Corona Relief Fund can be spent. And so what we're just doing here with the $50 million, there's a good chance we won't spend that all, but we're just putting that amount into the budget so that as you all go ahead and approve some projects and the expenditures, that we could actually fund those projects on an immediate basis. And that's what that $50 million is doing. And then when we go into next year's budget, when we approve that, we'll have whatever is remaining from the $166 million that hasn't been spent or allocated. We'll put that into next year's budget with the assumption that by December 30th, we will have found good causes that qualify to spend the entire amount of the $166 million. So that's what that $50 million is for. So any questions on that? That's just kind of a budgetary procedural thing to do. And none of it has been identified or for any specific thing. It's just giving you all the ability to actually go ahead and spend the money. Any questions on that?
This is a public hearing. Does anybody have any questions or comments regarding?
And then the other things there are just, you know, there's $750,000 for employee fringe benefits driven by the increased salaries. You know, we settled some contracts over the course of the year that had pretty significant retro payments. And when we do those retro payments, they come with benefits too. So that's what that'll cover us till the end of the year. There's $300,000 for public properties. They've had actually incurred some expenses right now that are COVID related in, you know, things they've had to do at county facilities and also some utility costs. So that gets them through the end of the month. $245,000. There were some significant incremental expenses with the election commission to run the primary under the conditions that we were facing. So that required additional funds. A piece of new equipment for the records imaging department. And then the other amount outside the general fund are about $1.4 million for the health center and community mental health center, and that is covering them. That's the amount of money they received from an additional sources of federal funding related to COVID-19. So they, you know, that money just kind of showed up magically in their bank account one day, and they want to, you know, encumber that money at the end of the year to spend it for the causes that it's meant for. And so in order to encumber it, we have to add it to their budget. So that's what we're doing. This is kind of just a short-term supplement to get us through June 30th and into the new fiscal year. So if you have any questions.
Thank you, Joe. Commissioner Boyle?
Yes, I do. Are these funds from the federal funds that we received?
Yes.
Okay. I don't like the 50 million sitting out there without some explanation, but I understand you have to do that. And the employee fringes are fine. The public properties is kind of mystifying how they had 300,000 in higher utility costs, but we can.
Well, it's also some COVID expenses that they've been spending on county facilities, like at the treasurer's office, you know, all the plexiglass and stuff like that. And,
okay. Thanks, that helps. Then we get down to the election commissioner, and I, you know, right after we appropriated $100,000 for the applications to vote by mail and everything, then the Secretary of State, oddly, which was, our timing was off, my fault, but the timing was off, and then the state steps up and says, we're gonna pay for all of this and do all these things. And so anyway, we lost out on that $100,000 appropriation. I think we need to talk about the November election, because that'll be in that cycle too, so that'll be some expense.
yeah, and that's an additional amount that we're working with Brian on in regards to the November election that will result in incremental spending too, but that should be CARES Act eligible.
Okay, should we put something in there for that or not? I mean,
not for this. This just gets us to June 30th. We'll have to put that in for the next year's budget.
Next fiscal
okay,
year.
Let me ask you a question about the records imaging department. That's not microfilming, is it? Please tell me it's not.
Maybe I shouldn't answer you that.
I mean, why don't we start using punch cards?
It's a statute, and you know, we have this discussion, but it's out of our control because they have. I agree with you. I think that they should make that change in Lincoln because I think it's a outdated technology. But at this point, it's still a statutory requirement.
Well, if we do that, we should probably have the information key punched in. We should hire a bunch of people to key punch that on cards, you know, or something. Anyway. Patrick, will you put this on the radar for Marcos for a legislative change? We need to bring this up. Tell Kelly, let's just talk about this. How about using the cloud instead of these machines that run film around or whatever it is they do, you know? The other thing I'd like to ask is this is spending of, these are out of that budget, the money that we received, okay? And I asked for, and I sent every commissioner a request. The only one who responded was Commissioner Borgerson, who told me that I shouldn't be we're not going to decide individual requests for spending the COVID money, and I think now is the time to ask for an amendment to this. I need money to serve the people that I represent, and if you look at the latest map that came from the Audipur, the only brilliant red area is a zip code in my district. That's where the really high incidence of COVID is occurring. and it is a serious problem. And they, on Friday, I guess it was, I was asked for $100,000, and there are organizations that are credible, that can account for it, that are giving money to families that are really strapped. And I would like to include $100,000 subject to complete audit like you're doing these other ones for residents of South Omaha in the highest COVID zip code, apparently in the state almost, if it's not, certainly it's in Douglas County.
Well, that $100,000 can certainly come out of the $50 million that we're allocating here.
So can I get that, can I ask to get that money out? What do I do, bring it back to the county board, or what do I do?
Yeah, that would be as we go into the prior topic where we were the commissioners would vote on specific COVID or CARES Act eligible expenditures. I think that would qualify it, and it just needs to get approved by the commissioners.
And commissioners, this is Patrick, the Bloomingdale County Administrator. We really want to have the discussion with Deloitte and Touche, if we can get them on board, as to how that would work mechanically. Does it qualify before we ask the board to pass a resolution to do that?
So you're saying we shouldn't vote on this?
No, this is not to expend money. This is a budget. This is just to put money in the budget. This is just a budget mechanism.
A budget supplement.
Yeah, it's a budget supplement. It's not actually approving any specific COVID expenditures.
Well, I mean, we're dedicating $245,000 to the election commissioner.
Yeah, that's going into his budget because he needs that money to make his payroll and his expenses that he's going to incur between now and June 30th.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is I'm getting this tremendous
Because he's
stall.
already spent the money.
Okay, well, I'm getting this tremendous stall on trying to help people, like I talked about earlier, this is turning into one big bureaucratic mess. I need money for the people in South Omaha that are fighting COVID now. For multi-generational families that are living together, one of them works for a packing house, it's spreading. It is very dangerous. I was in South Omaha over the weekend doing some things, and there were people who were coming up to me and saying, "What are you doing here?" And I had something I needed to do, and I was meeting with some people, and they're talking, someone actually said to me, "This is very dangerous because of the COVID." So, I mean, I appreciate the fact that, the microfilm people need $9,000 for this equipment, but there are people out there who absolutely need money, and small amounts. Now, we're not talking about a big deal, but they are ready to move. I mean, Catholic Charities is there. We've got all these operations out there for food, everything going, and they need help with masks. And, the county spent, $25,000 on custom masks, and yet I can't get $50,000 for a mask down in South Omaha. Now, what's the roadblock? What is the problem? I got 10,000 from Chris, which is great, but I need another 40, and there's also a group working through March, whatever it is, I always get the acronym screwed up, that's giving small amounts of money to families, like $200 and $300 to buy groceries, and some people to buy gas. So help me get relief for the people who need it in South Omaha. That's what I'm asking now. How are we gonna do this? We're gonna have to wait, am I have to wait for another month? When, do I, another week? What is the procedure? And I've been asking, Claire, and I understand you're not ready again this week, how does somebody, who qualifies and how do they apply? That's pretty basic, and I don't know why we need to have all this bureaucracy about this. So anyway, that's, who's got an answer? Where do I get this help for the people in South Omaha?
Commissioners, one of the issues is if the money is not spent appropriately, the county has to pay it back to the federal government.
But I mean, how much more solid is this when
the masks are pretty, the masks are pretty straightforward, and if somebody wants to put on a resolution for next week to purchase masks, I think that's, but that when you're talking about giving cash to people for food and such, which is a noble, obviously, endeavor, but does that qualify for under COVID? Under the CARES Act.
It's because they're not working. They lost their job because of COVID, and they're not working, and they don't give cash. They give, chits for the grocery store that have to be spent for food that are qualified.
And that's what we need to work out.
I guess what I'd like to do is maybe I ought to declare an emergency and suspend the rules and get the money today. I mean, what is the deal? But I'll put a resolution on for next week, but I really think we're running into, for some reason, we've got this
slow motion thing. I feel like we're moving through with nothing getting, I understand we're making some project, but boy, there's some real basic stuff that people need help, and they don't need, they don't need this. So I'll come back with a resolution next week very clearly asking for help, including vouchers for food and gasoline. So, and that will also include, I'm going to get those masks, I suppose, through Commissioner Rogers. He did a great job getting me those other ones. So I'll try to settle down and get that stuff put together and be back next week, but I don't like the delays. I'll say so right now.
So, just let me say, Commissioner Boyle, I feel you on that because I've heard some of those conversations. I think we just need to sit down and get an idea because the masks you're saying here were pretty much for employees, so they were covered. The other masks that you're talking about, the state is handling most of the procurement for that, so they can get it in bulk. Let's just talk about a number. I couldn't get that many in one pot, but we can talk about how to get them in increments. So there's a way to do that. I think we just need to understand what those particular needs are because some of those needs are not in the county's purview. For instance, if they're having job situations of losing jobs, that's the state through workforce. They got special CARES money the governor laid out in that for unemployment insurance and other things like that. I think you just need to weed through some of the direct payment pieces because if it's food, I think we can find that. I'm thinking now we just need to understand where it is to divert it there because the way it's coming, the CARES money can't be used just directly like that to give out for need. That's my interpretation of it, but the mask thing, and if we want to sit down and lay those specific things out, I know there's some places that I got that going right now, and we can work that.
Well, I appreciate the advice, and I'll sit down with you right after this meeting. But again, here you are. I mean, it's not your fault, but you're talking about, well, that's not our deal. We don't do windows. We got to go to the state to have them give the masks, and that's their deal. And then we're not sure that people who lost their jobs qualify under COVID. I mean, that's just bizarre that they wouldn't qualify.
No, they don't qualify to get straight money. They have, if they've lost their jobs, they have to go through the unemployment route. This is not saying we don't do this. What I'm saying is let's lay it out and we can find out who does it to get them there.
Well, I guess I understand what you're saying, but I'm still saying that we're not giving cash to people.
Mhm.
We're giving them chits that they give to a gas station to buy gas and grocery stores to buy approved groceries. So it's not like they're going out and buying a cabin still or something. They're not buying a bunch of booze. The whole point of it all is that, and it's not cash. But I just think it's all qualified, and I can't imagine, even if it wasn't, even if the Fed said you can't spend that's $100,000, and I think that's reasonable for us. If we lose, we would lose $100,000. I'll try to play by the rules, but it certainly is agonizing to try to beg from the state to get face masks for people in South Omaha that have needed them for a couple of months. But I'll keep working on it, and I'll talk to you, and we'll try to cut through all this red tape.
Other comments about the budget proposals during this public hearing? If not, I am going to close the public hearing. What is the will of the board? Motion by Commissioner Rogers, second by Commissioner Borgeson to approve the supplemental budget. If there are no further questions or comments, could we please vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you, Mark.
Motion passes 6-0, 5 voting in person, 1 voting virtually.
Thank you. The next thing, I'm guessing we don't have anything under finance to be reporting today. I got the minutes from the May 27th Health and Human Services Committee meeting in there. Ooh.
What was the question? I'm sorry. The county clerk.
The Health and Human Services Committee.
Is that available? Can I read it?
Yeah, the minutes were
on
submitted
here?
last week, and it would have came from Kim Bolo. I can resend it to you if you'd like.
Is it on here somewhere? Are the minutes included?
Well, I mean, they're not. Normally we just the agenda just notes that they've been completed.
All right, okay, thanks.
Anything under legislative issues that we need to be concerned with this morning? I hope not.
I have one. Get rid of that microfilm stuff and get into the 18th century.
All right. Okay. I believe that brings us then to the end of the agenda. We do have need for an executive session for union negotiations. Is that right?
Union negotiations, I believe.
That's the only thing I'm
that
aware
is
of.
it. No litigation.
And legal advice.
Oh, we have legal advice too.
All right, negotiations and legal advice. Before we adjourn, though, I do want to point out, I mean, obviously, we will take no public action after we come back out of exec session today. But I do want to point out, next week is going to be a little bit different. We're going to have a joint meeting at 8:30 before our regular 9 o'clock county board meeting with the Washington County Board. We could do it telephonically because the law still allows that for the month of June, but it's my understanding most of the Washington County supervisors are going to come join us in person. So next week at 8:30, only one item on that agenda, and that having to do with the Bennington Fire District changing their status. But I think that's going to be kind of interesting.
Permits and tell them to park in the garage
Sure.
as a courtesy.
Sure. You betcha. Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session for negotiations and legal advice. We have a motion from Commissioner Boyle, second from Commissioner Morgan. Questions or comments? Then let's vote, please.
I vote yes.
Motion passes 6-0, 5 voting yes in person, 1 voting virtually.
Thank you.
All right.
I vote yes, and I'll do it on my machine, so you don't harass me.
Well, the hard time he gives me, and I give it to him once, all right, you know? Motion passes 5-0, 5 voting yes in person, 2 absent.